Pleasanton Unified School District's Board of Trustees meeting of February 25th, 2021. Would you all rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Just a few housekeeping notes tonight. This meeting is conducted online. However, the board and the cabinet and staff are here in person in the boardroom. You had an opportunity to submit yellow comment cards for items that are on the agenda or blue comment cards for those that are not on the agenda. And as has been our practice for these last low months, when you are wishing to speak to the board on an item, you will be held in a waiting room. While other items are considered, you won't be able to hear what we're at the point at which we're in the agenda, so you should watch it on another, on either streaming or on the TV. And then when it's the item you wish to speak, you'll be called in and you will have 2 minutes to address the board on that item, and TV 30 will be displaying a public comment graphic and broadcasting audio for public comment. So tonight, just a couple introductions. To my right here is Superintendent Dr. David Haglund. I'm Joan Larson. I'm the president this year of the board. Next to me is Trustee Steve Maher, Vice President Mark Miller, Trustee Kelly Mukashi, Trustee Mary Jo Carrion, and down in the audience area, we have Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Dr. Janelle Woodward, Assistant Superintendent of Student Support Services, Mr. Ed Dialazo, Assistant Superintendent of Human Resources, Mr. Julio Hernandez, Assistant Superintendent of Business Services, Mr. Ahmed Sheikh Al-Aslami, and Patrick Gannon, who is our coordinator of, I can never get it, Communication and Community Engagement. There we go. Sorry about that. It's a long one. And tonight we also have our student board member from Village High School, Brian Glasgow, with us. So I do have some closed session items to report. Let's see here. The first one is item, sorry about that. (2.1.1), which is the appointment of a coordinator one of risk management. And we are pleased to report that we appointed unanimously Ms. Gwendolyn Stewart, again, coordinator one of risk management. The motion was made by Trustee Mukashi and seconded by Trustee Maher, and again, the vote was unanimous. Welcome very much. Is Ms. Stewart on the Zoom by any chance?
Yes, I am.
Oh, would you like to speak?
Oh, yes. Well, I just want to first of all say thank you very much for considering myself. I'm very excited to move into the arena of public education, and just being able to bring, my knowledge and skills, and also be able to enhance some of the challenges that you guys are incorporating, that have had to deal with, and come up with conclusions and goals and so forth. So I'm really excited to move forward with this Pleasanton School District. I believe it's going to be the cherry on top of my career.
Well, we're really happy to have you here, and appreciate all your experience with risk management, and I'm sure you're going to fit right in. So welcome very much.
Thank you very much.
And then item 2.1.2, this is ratification of Coordinator 2 Pandemic Services. And the board is pleased to announce that we unanimously approved this. We ratified the appointment of Ms. Kelly French as the Coordinator 2 for Pandemic Services. And that motion was made by Trustee Carrion and seconded by Trustee Mukashi. Ms. French, are you on the Zoom? Would you like to speak?
I am on on the Zoom and I would love to speak. Can you guys hear me?
We can.
Great. Okay. Good evening, Superintendent Haglund, Cabinet members, and Board of Trustees. As you know, I'm a longtime supporter of the Pleasant Unified School District, and as a parent in the school district, I sincerely appreciate all the hard work that goes on behind the scenes, especially now while we're preparing to reopen our campuses after a long year of distance learning. I'm thrilled to be joining the leadership team as the Pandemic Services Coordinator. There's much work to be done to safely return our staff and our students to our campuses. I've been working at our staff COVID-19 testing site since December, and I'm excited to take on a larger role while serving in this new position. I enjoyed meeting my coworker Quinn tonight and look forward to working together. And I want to thank you for this opportunity. I look forward to working with you and employees throughout the district in the months to come.
Welcome. We're super happy to have you. That concludes our employment announcements from closed session tonight. I do have one other item to announce, and that is item 2.3. And so in closed session on this item, the board voted 5-0, moved by Trustee Carrion and seconded by Trustee McCaughey, to approve a compromise and release settlement agreement for internal case number SED 110.20.21 for the amount not to exceed $16,500. So that's all that we have from closed session tonight. We next move to item 5, which is approval of the agenda. I know we have one item that is going to be pulled and brought back at a later date. That's an item on consent, 11.4. That will be removed. Are there any other amendments to the agenda? All right, I'll seek a motion to approve the agenda as amended.
I'll approve the amended, I will approve the amended agenda, or move to approve the amended agenda.
I'm sorry, President Larson, I had a question about 11.2.
So the item that I'm pulling is being pulled at the request of staff, and it's going to come back to a different meeting. 11.4. So if it's a question about just having a conversation about an item in consent, that we don't need to do that in the approval of the agenda. I'm just letting the public know that we will not be considering 11.4 tonight, as it is coming back at a later date. Okay, so it's been moved to accept the agenda, approve the agenda as amended. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All the, Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Trustee McCaughey?
Aye.
Trustee Miller?
Aye.
Trustee Maher?
Aye.
And aye. Thank you. Okay. Thank you. Tonight, in our recognitions, I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Haglund to introduce our speakers.
Very good. Thank you, President Larson. First of all, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Janelle Woodward, who's going to introduce Mr. Nugent, I believe, or do you want me to go ahead and do that? Sure. Our first recognition tonight will be done by Dr. Amos Nugent, who is our Director of Career Technical Education and Adult Education. And Amos, are you on the line?
Yes, I am.
There
Thank
you
you
go.
so much, Superintendent Haglund, Board President, Trustees, Executive Cabinet. Good evening. It is our pleasure tonight to come before you to just recognize and allow you all to help us recognize two of our very own staff members who are being celebrated for the great work they do. So tonight, our Assistant Director, Ms. Crystal Corbis, will share with you about two of our staff members and their wonderful achievements. We'll have Mrs. Crystal Corbis, our Assistant Director, go first with our first candidate.
Good evening. It's great to see everyone tonight. Our first recognition is of Maureen Galuhi, known as Mo to her friends and coworkers. And she is being recognized tonight and will be recognized during a virtual ceremony, along with our next awardee, by the California Council on Adult Education. Mo is one of 4 teachers of excellence in the base section. And the base section is one of 6 sections across the state of California, comprised of adult education administrators, teachers, and staff members. Mo has been singled out for her work, excellent work this year, supporting 10 interns in our Project Search program, a program which is regionally recognized and known well for providing integrated training opportunities for adults with intellectual and/or developmental disabilities who have a desire to gain employment. From developing an engaging and inspirational curriculum to the teamwork that she demonstrates every day with our employment training specialists, Mo is a superstar, and her efforts are greatly appreciated. Her dedication to the interns that she supports at the Project Search or within our Project Search program is significant and heartfelt. Thank you so much, Mo. Would you like to say a few words?
Thank you, Crystal. I just want to say it's an honor to work with such a dedicated, caring staff in Pleasanton Adult Career Education. I enjoy being part of a team that's committed to serving our lifelong learners in these challenging times. It really is a privilege to serve with such a diverse community of adults and support them in their dreams and goals. Thank you.
Wonderful. And now I'd like to have Dr. Nugent make the next presentation.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Corbus. I appreciate that. Tonight I have the privilege of recognizing Mrs. Isabel Stearns. And truly, we won't do it, but I could go on all night talking about Isabel, because from the moment I began back in July, truly Isabel was a gem, and her value and worth to our organization just was proved many times over. When we came on, she was the sole staff member who had the most seniority. So her historical and institutional knowledge of many of the practices, spanning both the operations of our adult education programs and our CTE programs, really helped to get us through until Crystal was able to join us in October. She really stepped up and went above and beyond the call of duty on several different occasions, doing whatever was needed to ensure that our programs continue to operate with the highest levels of efficiency and excellence. And she is highly praised and recognized by many of her colleagues, both classified and certificated, for just her excellent level of service. Even the vendors and our students in our program all love her. And so we really just value and appreciate Isabel for just consistently coming in with a smile, also being a parent in the district. And we are just humbled that she is able to be recognized at a larger level this year. Actually, both her and Mo will be recognized next month with this ceremony with the California Council for Adult Education. So Isabel, thank you so much for all of your hard work. We appreciate you. Thank you, Dr. Haglund.
Congratulations. Was Isabel here by any chance to say a few words?
Yes, I'm sorry. Isabel, would you please like to say a few words?
Thank you, Dr. Nugent.
Sure. Hi. Thank you so much, Amos and Crystal. I agree with Mo. Our office is a great place to work, and most of all, both Amos and Crystal are excellent directors. They're an inspiration to work for. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our second recognition tonight, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Ed Dialazzo.
Thank you, Dr. Haglund. Good evening, President Larson, Board of Trustees, Cabinet members, community, and staff. Tonight we are here to celebrate a few of our amazing students being recognized for one of the community of character traits. So I'm really excited to introduce our students. One thing I didn't do last time was thank the person who really holds all of this together, and that is our Director of Student Services, Kathleen Reef. So I'm not going to forget tonight. So Kathleen, I know you're behind the scenes there organizing our students. Throughout the year, we recognize students who demonstrate one of the 6 identified community of character traits. The traits include compassion, honesty, respect, responsibility, integrity, and self-discipline. This evening, we are recognizing students who are nominated by school staff for demonstrating the character trait of honesty. We want to thank our students for their hard work at school and their outstanding character. Tonight, award winners are being recognized from Moore Elementary, Pleasanton Middle School, and Amador Valley High School. Now, I'd like to introduce our student board member, Brian Glasgow, who will read the nominations of our students. And students, just a reminder, when Brian reads your name, please say hello so we can see your faces on the screen. Okay, Brian, I'm going to throw it over to you.
Mr. Dialazzo. First, we would like to recognize one student from Moore Elementary School, Jackson Cross, second grade. Jackson was nominated by Anna Mortensen. Jackson has been working hard and is always honest. Jackson always lets me know where he is with each subject and never hesitates to participate. Jackson is a great example of an honest student. Congratulations, Jackson.
Hi.
Next, for the middle school level, we would like to recognize 3 students from Pleasanton Middle School. First up is Landon Ostlin, 6th grade. Landon was nominated by Ann Cartwright. Landon always has a positive attitude and shares his thoughts and opinions in a way that improves our classroom environment. Landon's open honesty has also inspired other students to comment, respond, and participate in class. Thank you, Landon, for your bright smile, honest conversation, and continued participation. It is much appreciated. Congratulations, Landon.
Hi.
Next, we have Eva Carranza, 8th grade. Eva was nominated by Elsa Backers. Eva is a student who is always honest with me and her schoolmates. I appreciate the way she works hard and sets a great example for the other students in class. Thank you for your kindness, consideration, and honesty, Eva. Congratulations, Eva.
Hello.
Next, from PMS, Luca Moore, 8th grade. Luca was nominated by Deborah Evans. Luca demonstrates his honesty when others are watching, and even when he feels no one is watching. We love seeing our 8th graders modeling what it means to have Panther pride to our younger students. Congratulations, Luca.
Hi.
At the high school level, we will be recognizing 3 students from Amador High School. We would like to recognize Joshua Delp, 9th grade. Joshua was nominated by Danielle Hubbard. Joshua worked on a group project and admitted that he did not do as much work as his other group members. I told him that his group members would receive an A+ for their efforts. I asked him what he believed he earned and should be given as a grade. He said he should be given a lower grade. I appreciated his honesty and thanked him for it. Congratulations, Joshua.
Hello.
Next, we have Rachel Tanis, grade 11. Rachel was nominated by Wendy Hush. In class, Rachel is always trying to help, and if there is something that could be improved, she is honest and tactful. Rachel is also honest about her own values. If there is something that gets in the way of her participating fully, she is honest and forthright with me. Additionally, Rachel is one of the sweetest people you will meet. She says thank you after every class and is a positive, honest human being who, in my opinion, deserves this award. Congratulations, Rachel. Lastly, for this evening, we are excited to recognize Sheena Seymour, grade 12. Sheena was nominated by Dawn Silva. Sheena is a student in my Lifetime Fitness class. She has openly and honestly shared the challenges she faces in holding down a job, completing schoolwork, and finding time for PE workouts. And yet, she rises to meet these challenges. I often ask this class for input on class format / technology, etc. And Sheena will speak up with her honest, mature, and well-articulated opinion. I really appreciate having her in class. Congratulations, Sheena.
Hello. Hello. I don't know if that. Okay.
We are so proud of our award winners. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you very much, Brian, and we appreciate you, students, and congratulations. You'll be receiving a certificate indicating your recognition and award tonight. Thank you very much again. Dr. Haglund?
I'd just like to say that as much as I enjoyed hearing about you, I cannot wait to see you in person again. And I'm sorry we just had to do this, via Zoom tonight. Your nominations your recognitions by your teachers and other staff, you've been noticed, and the good work that you're doing, and we just really want to congratulate you. I do want to take this opportunity now, before we go on to item number 7, to announce a new opportunity. So Dr. Haglund and I were talking about introducing the opportunity for board members who might like to do a recognition, nominate someone to come be recognized at the board meeting. And so we talked a little bit about it, and what we'd like to propose is that it's not required, but that board members have an opportunity every year each board member could nominate up to 2 people. So tried to work out the logistics a little bit, and assigning it didn't seem to work very well, just because, things come up and things don't come up when it's your time to to make a selection. So just saying that you have the opportunity to recognize a staff member, a student, anyone that you would like to say something, you would make the presentation and the introduction and the recognition yourself. And in fact, we have our first one next week. Mr. Maher will be making that recognition. I'll let it be a surprise until the agenda comes out, or the 11th, until the agenda comes out. But just start thinking about it. And again, it's not a requirement, but you have the opportunity to select 2 people throughout the year that you would like to recognize, and just let me know, let Dr. Haglund and I know ahead of time, so that we can make sure the arrangements get made. So, all right, yay. Okay, moving on then to item number 7. Tonight we have the Association of Pleasanton Teachers, President Michelle Verkeilen.
Good evening, President Larson, members of the board, Dr. Haglund, members of the cabinet, and our community. I am Michelle Verkeilen, President of the Association of Pleasanton Teachers. First, I would like to commend every member of our community in working together to get the spread down of this deadly virus. We know that it is highly contagious, and we know that it takes a village cooperating with masking, distancing, and additional precautions to fight it. Thank you. Because of this, coupled with the beginning of the vaccine process, our educators will be able to re-enter classrooms feeling safer and more protected, which will allow them to focus on their jobs of educating our students. APT is comprised of over 750 teachers, librarians, behaviorists, clinicians, therapists, speech-language pathologists, social workers, teachers on special assignment, counselors, nurses, psychologists, program intervention, and integration specialists, all working diligently because they believe Pleasanton students deserve the best. I want to be clear. No one wants to be back in classrooms with students more than educators, who know there is no equal substitute for regular in-person learning. For that to happen, there must be multi-layered safety measures in place, including personal protective equipment, adequate ventilation, smaller class sizes for social distancing, testing and tracing programs for students and staff, transparent school safety plans, regular facilities cleaning, hand washing, and access to vaccines. APT has been working diligently and collaboratively with the Pleasanton Unified School District to ensure all of this is in place to welcome our students back in a safe and healthy environment, which is what all of us want at the end of the day. We also want to ensure that our students, who we interact with every day, are aware of how the environment will look when they return to in-person instruction. After time away from friends, the urge to hug or just get close to someone will be stronger than ever. However, The reality is that things will look very different once students return to in-person instruction, and managing expectations is crucial to ensure the safety of everyone on campus. We understand that parents are frustrated because COVID-19 has caused a tremendous strain on families, but we also want the same goal as parents, which is to return to in-person instruction with all safety requirements in place. Educators have been working harder than ever for that to happen as safely as possible, and we kindly ask for parents to cooperate with us and be patient. Actions like recording educators and students without their permission is not only unlawful, but raises concerns with regards to respect for the law, including the in-person safety requirements. It will take all of us united to get through this together. We are all working in good faith to do what's best to educate our students and keep us all safe and healthy. What our educators have been able to do during remote learning is incredible. Other educators from around the country and even across the world look to Pleasanton Unified to learn from their superb practices. As we broach another beginning, we know you have heard teachers express concerns about concurrent teaching, a process actually banned in Minnesota. This model is a solution to solve the problem of how to open in the midst of a pandemic, but it will be challenging for the roomies, Zoomies, and teachers as they embark on yet another instructional model of delivery this year. I do know that our teachers will rise to the occasion, teaching 2 different groups in 2 spaces at the same time, because they always go above and beyond to meet the needs of their students. Again, I want to publicly state how proud I am to stand and represent all the members of the Associations of Pleasanton Teachers. This union is made up of all the educators that your children interact with on a daily basis. This union is made up of all the educators that reach out and support your family and your children in their education journey. They are the ones your children write sweet cards to and the ones who provide a shoulder to cry on when needed. Thank you to all the families that continue to reach out to us and tell us how much you appreciate all we are doing and have done during these especially difficult times. It really does help us carry forward. We appreciate you as well, as you have worked side by side with us to make this work. We do all we do because Pleasanton students deserve the best. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Tonight, President Derek Pissarros of California School Employees Association is not with us, so we will not hear from him. So at this time, we'll move on to item number 8, which is public comment from the community on items not on our agenda. Do we have any comments not on our agenda tonight?
We did have one, President Larson, but there is no one in our attendee room, so
Okay.
there are no comments for this
So
evening.
no comments tonight. All right, so then we will move on to hearing from someone who you heard from earlier, our student board member from Village High School for the student board member report, Brian Glasgow. Welcome.
Hi again. My name is Brian Glasgow, and I'm a senior at Village High School. Since the last board meeting, we have finished the first semester. 13 students graduated early at the end of the semester. And we have also gained 20 new students since the semester started. In advisory, we have been learning about suicide prevention with our district social workers and how to apply for scholarships for college. And we looked at our transcripts to make sure we are on track to graduate. In leadership class, we are working to create a weekly newsletter for students outlining announcements from the office, the attendance clerk, any schedule changes, and even adding in some resources for students. In culinary, we are looking into fruits and vegetables and how to prepare healthy meals. In farm to fork, we are looking at the soil. It may sound boring, but soil can be extremely intricate. In geometry, we have learned compositions and symmetry. We have gone more in depth with how reflections and rotations work on different shapes. In art, we are learning about the different techniques for drawing facial features and portraits. So far, we have drawn eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and facial hair. Lastly, we have applied each technique to our final portrait of a person of our choice. In African American literature, we're learning about the life of the famous Black speaker James Baldwin. We are reading his autobiography and responding to quotes that are particularly powerful. In civics, we are digging deep and finding out about the roots of democracy in America and how it works. In U.S. history, we are talking about Asian immigration and how they moved here and the reasons why. In physical science, students spent time working on creating their own topographic maps and learning about landforms and erosion. Also about groundwater and where most of Earth's fresh water is stored. In PE, we have been learning about different muscle groups and how to exercise them. We have learned exercises for our triceps, our core, and our biceps. We record ourselves doing each exercise to make sure that our form is correct. In Econ, we are learning about how to budget a family using a Google Docs simulation. We are each assigned a family, and we have to update their budget on a weekly basis. In advisory, we have been focusing on catching up on our schoolwork during student support time, where we can ask our teachers questions or get extra help on any assignments we're struggling with. We have a new virtual wellness room made by our district counselors where we can access different resources for self-care, healthy relationships, and even coloring pages to help relax. Study hall is still being held on Wednesdays during our asynchronous learning time so we can meet with the teacher and be accountable for getting our work done. As Pleasanton Unified is continuing distance learning, leadership class is finding more ways to keep students engaged in school spirit and keeping morale high. We held our second Spirit Week and had fun dressing up, playing games, and working together to see who has the most school spirit. Ruth's advisory class won for the second time this year. They will earn Village Bucks and a gift certificate to Porky's Pizza. In lieu of our traditional Valentine's Day celebration, the leadership class made digital Valentines for all students with encouraging quotes to help brighten up their days. I would also like to take this time to just say, on behalf of the students at Village, thank you to all the teachers in the district for all of their hard work and perseverance during these difficult and ever-changing times. We support you just as you support us. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. That was a nice report. Are there any questions for Brian tonight? All right, thank you very much. Now we'll move on to item 10, Superintendent's Report.
Thank you, President Larson. If you'll grant me a minute or two of personal privilege, I want to begin my comments with a reminder that we are all members of a team, one that works within a community that identifies itself as a community of character, as demonstrated by our students just a few moments ago. As members of the Pleasanton Community of Character Collaborative, we promote the traits of compassion, honesty, respect, integrity, self-discipline, and responsibility with our students, and we strive to hold those same ideals as individuals and as a school system. These past several months, those ideals have been put to the test in new and challenging ways. There have been moments to celebrate as we rose up together to face a pandemic, and there have also been times when we have struggled to find a common set of facts. It has saddened me a great deal to see the level of dissension at play in the community of late, even as we strive to hold ourselves and one another accountable for things that benefit our children and make Pleasanton a wonderful place to live, work, and raise a family. Social media has exposed a flaw in our community of character, and I am hopeful that we can see this as a call to action. I believe that we are better than what is sometimes reflected online. Collectively, we're more compassionate, more purposeful, more respectful, and more honest. The online chatter is often caustic and many times unfounded. As such, it can bear long-term consequences for both the individuals and the community that surrounds them. A simple, private conversation between real people can often result in a very different outcome, one that's more reflective of mutual respect and compassion. As we move forward, let's strive to approach conflict with a bit of grace, or as we ask of our students, to be compassionate, respectful, and self-disciplined members of the Pleasanton community of character. We have an exciting but very busy few weeks ahead of us. Over the past few weeks, the district has been bargaining in good faith with our teachers union to address the impacts and effect of transitioning back to in-person learning. This afternoon, the district and APT reached a tentative agreement. However, we did not yet have a countersigned agreement at hand. Earlier this evening, we received a commitment via email from the APT president that we do in fact have a verbal tentative agreement, which is pending signatures. As such, the district is moving forward with staff orientation tomorrow, and we're excited to welcome our preschool through second grade students and teachers back to their classrooms on March 4th, 2021. And over the course of the next few weeks, our schools will welcome students of all grades back onto campus. I want to congratulate all of the members of our negotiating teams and say thank you, sincerely thank you, for your hard work in this process. Our classrooms will undoubtedly look a bit different, but those differences will be mitigated by the dedication of our teachers and classified staff. Extensive and detailed planning has been conducted by our school principals in collaboration with members of the district leadership team. While many students will be back on campus, we will continue to support students through remote learning for the remainder of this year. And as we did when we initially made the shift to remote learning, I need to ask you once more for grace and patience from the members of our family and our community. Our teachers are once again embarking into new territory, requiring new practices and complex instructional models. There will undoubtedly be bumps in the road in the days ahead. I know our team members will be highly resourced. I know them to be highly resourceful and resilient individuals. Your growth mindset and passion for learning will push us all forward together to benefit our young people. All of us have an important role to play in the success of these efforts to return students to campus. So please, do your part by continuing to wear a mask, wash your hands frequently, and practice physical distancing whenever you're outside of your home. Let's open schools, and let's do what we need to do to keep them open by being safe. That's my comments for tonight.
Thank you. Very well said. Just wanted to add one thing about this in the terms of the grace. So some of you may know that my son is a high school math teacher in another district. And we, of course, have many conversations about lots of education things. And he's already somebody who did blended learning before this started and all of that. But what he said to me really stuck. And again, I would echo your comment about grace. Those teachers who start in this profession, your first year is all brand new. There is no box of lesson plans waiting for you when you walk in the door. Nobody tells you how to do anything. Everything is brand new. You're inventing everything for your class. It's just a huge endeavor, and you're up late and you're designing new things and you're trying new stuff and seeing what works and how are you going to do all of this. And that's what this year has been like for our teachers. So they have to, it's in some ways been like they've been a first-year teacher all over again. And now we're stepping into another mode where they're going to have to adapt again. And some might say, that's what keeps you, all the synapses clicking and it's exciting and great and, challenging and all of those wonderful things. But it's also extremely tiring and it's hard. And so I just want to say, again, that grace for us as we all transition again is warranted. So I just wanted to add that. So we'll now move on to the rest of the items on our business agenda tonight, one of which is our consent calendar. These are items that are routine in nature, typically passed without a lot of discussion. We do have, as we mentioned earlier, one item which was pulled from the agenda tonight, 11.4. It will come back to us later. And we have a request from a couple of board members to pull item 11.2 for further discussion. Is there any other item a board member wishes to pull from the consent tonight? All right, I'll seek a motion to approve the consent without 11.2 and 11.4.
So moved.
Okay. Trustee Carrion? Aye. Makashi?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Maher? Aye. Aye. All right, so the consent calendar is approved. We'll now come back to 11.2. Steve, did you want to address?
Yes, Julio, I think I'll address you on this. While I agree with the MOU and the professional development for our classified employees, we have a group of employees that work just as hard, and they're not covered in this MOU, and that would be our noon duty supervisors, campus supervisors, campus helpers, help direct traffic out with kids, and they're going to be really involved when we come back. I would like to see them added to this request so they get professional development and receive the just compensation that they would.
At the direction of the board, I could definitely put something together if that's the will of the board to do so.
Okay. Trustee Makashi, you had some comments?
Very similar, just that we need to make sure to recognize, a lot of staff that are in the forefront. They're going to be out there next week greeting our students and helping with traffic flow, and, they definitely need to have the same provisions as the other classified staff.
I appreciate that. The agreement is with the collective bargaining agreement for classified. The classifications that were mentioned by Trustee Maher are not represented. But again, at the will of the board, we could definitely engage a similar language.
Yes, so exactly. I'm just adding short-term coaches, any unrepresented staff. Yes, I'm agreeing with Trustee Maher.
And they're going to be with our children a lot, just as much as any other classified employee. So they need to be properly.
So could I make a suggestion that we allow Mr. Hernandez to come back to us with a proposal, as opposed to at this point providing specific direction on individual classifications?
Yes, President Larson, that's a great recommendation.
We want to approve this one and then have him come back with a second one then?
That's what I'm thinking.
Okay, I'll move approval of 11.2.
I'll second it.
So it's been moved and seconded to approve the memorandum of understanding between CSEA Chapter 155 and PUSD regarding COVID-19 training. Is there any further discussion on it?
No.
All right. Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Kashi?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Maher?
Aye.
Aye. So it passes 5-0 with the direction that we would seek a proposal to address our non-bargaining unit members.
Mr. Hernandez, but some of them will be back next Friday?
Next
the
Thursday
4th, the
for
4th.
elementary.
Yeah.
It will require board action unless other directions given, I believe, to the superintendent. We will do what we can to to accommodate that. I know that there's an interest, so we will try our best to do that. But given again that the next board meeting is after we start, there may be more direction that needs to be given to the superintendent to me.
I'm happy to exercise my authority to do that.
Thank you. Our unrepresented staff would greatly appreciate that.
This is actually consistent with what we did when we negotiated the raise last time. We attached a secondary motion to ensure that the hourly employees did get a raise of commensurate size.
Well, we could do a motion if you would feel that direction is not clear enough.
Well, if David has the authority to do it, I trust that he'll move in the right direction.
David does, and it would allow us the opportunity to get it done before these opportunities take place.
All right,
Okay.
there we go. All right, so that is all the items. I believe we're going to hear from Mr. Dialazzo for our annual enrollment report.
Yes, thank you, President Larson. Before you is a report and discussion item on our annual student enrollment report. And this report will include some enrollment data, some 5-year trends on enrollment, enrollment growth and decline this year, as well as disaggregated enrollment by grade, by school, and many other metrics. So I'm going to turn it over to our Director of Student Services, Ms. Kathleen Reif, who will go over the presentation and walk us through the document. Ms. Reif?
Great. Thank you so much, Mr. Dialazzo, and good evening, everyone. We are going to go ahead and start our annual student enrollment report on our first slide. We get there. With our census day totals. Here it is. So this is our census day total student enrollment for our TK through 12th grade programs, going from 2015-16 to 2020-21. So if you start at the top of that chart there, you'll see our total enrollment was 14,741 students back in 2015-16. And kind of going down the chart there, you'll see 2016-17, we increased by 27 students. In 2017-18, we increased by 78 students. 2018-19, we increased by 112 students. So that year we had kind of a peak enrollment of 14,958 students in our TK through 12th grade programs. And then 19-20, we saw a little bit of a decline, kind of back down to that number from 2017-18. And then this year we have seen a decrease in the number of students in our programs from TK through 12th grade by about 414 students compared to last year. So we'll go a little bit more into depth in a few slides about where we saw most of that decrease and how it breaks down. So on this slide, this is a visual of the district enrollment numbers that we just looked at on the previous slide. So from the left-hand side, you can see our total enrollment for TK through 12th grade in 2015-16. Going across, you can see the peak in 2018-19 of that 14,958. And then you'll see that decrease in 2020-21, that decrease of another 414 students compared to last year. So on this slide, you can see this is our census day enrollment by grade level. And we have it broken down by elementary level, middle school level, and high school level. And we have a comparison each October going back from 2015 all the way to the right there on October of 2020. So if you look at the elementary one-year comparison, you can see the largest part of our decrease of that 414 student count was at our elementary level. So we saw a decrease of 239 students this year compared to the same time last year. In middle school, we saw a decrease of 129 students. And in high school, we saw a decrease of about 46 students. If you look at that from a 5-year comparison, so taking this October, comparing it to October of 2015, you can see those the counts there with a total decrease of 299 students. Okay, so on this slide, we have our Census Day elementary enrollment. So now we're breaking this down by level. So you can see in 2015-16, we had a peak there of 6,262 students. And it stayed pretty consistent up until this year, where we had that decrease of 239 students down to 5,943. So from left to right, with 2020-21 being on the far right there. On this slide, same sort of thing. We have our middle school enrollment snapshot. So you can see how we gained enrollment from 2015 to 2016-17, kind of peaked there. And then we have a decrease in enrollment down to this year, where we have 3,412 students. Okay, and in high school, you can see 2015-16 was kind of a low, and now we've increased in our student enrollment in our high school programs, peaking last year in 2019-20 with 5,133 students, and then this year taking that small dip to 5,087 students. Okay, on this slide, we have our Census Day enrollment comparison to year-end growth from 2015-16 all the way to 2020-21. So we like to also look at our enrollment. We take that snapshot each October and we compare that year to year. But then we also like to look at our trends to see if we gain or lose students from October through the last day of school. So sometimes that day was in June, sometimes that day is in May. So we just write last day of school. So from 2015-16, we had a little bit of growth. We grew by 58 students by the end of the school year. 16-17, we gained 84 students. In 2017-18, you may recall we gained a lot of students in the middle of the year, mostly around, I think it was December. We had 140 students total that year in December, January, through the end of the year. Come join us. And then in 2018-19, we decreased a little bit by 9 students. And then last year, we gained 37. So this year we haven't had our end of the school year yet, so we don't know that number, so it's TBD. Thanks. So for transitional kindergarten, we also look at our TK enrollment. TK program is for students with birthdays from September 2nd through December 2nd. And typically we have now about 8 programs. So going back in 2015-16 at the top of that graph there, you can see we had 7 programs. And back in then we kind of grew the program through 2018-19. We added our 8th program at Walnut Grove. The only site that currently does not have a TK program is at Donlin. And if you reside in the Donlin area, we place your student at another school site just for that TK year only. So this year we did see a bit of a decrease in the number of students enrolled in our TK program. And we think a lot of parents ended up choosing to keep their kids in private preschools or in programs that were open in person. Okay, overflow of elementary students as of Census Day. So from 2015-16 to 2020-21. Sometimes some of our sites have more students who reside in the area than we have spaces available in their grade level. So when that happens, our school staff will need to overflow students from one site to another. So for example, if Donlin is one of our more impacted sites, if there's not a space in the kindergarten program there, we'll place the student at a school that's close. Sometimes that's Leidixon, sometimes that's Moore, sometimes it's Walnut Grove. So it just kind of depends on what's available by grade level. So you can see the totals at the bottom. So it's broken down by grade level. the totals at the bottom, the number of students that were being overflowed, did peak in that 2018-19 school year. And now this year, it's decreased a little bit back down to 145 students. Okay, so this slide is a slide with a whole lot of data. We have our 5-year enrollment history, and this is our census day year-to-year comparison by school site. So we have all of the school sites listed on the left-hand side there, going in alphabetical order. So our elementary sites are first, from Alisal all the way down to Walnut Grove. Then we have our middle schools in the middle there, and then our high schools towards the bottom of the chart. And then going across from 2015-16 to 2016-17, all the way over to the right-hand side to 2020-21. So each year when we look at our enrollment, we make decisions for the following year to see if we need to add a class at a certain grade level or reduce a class in a certain grade level. And we start to do that typically in January. We look at students and where they'll be transitioning and moving up into classes and provide staffing accordingly. So go ahead and on to the next slide. Thank you. So on our demographer projections and census day enrollment, we look at the demographer's projections and then like to give you a comparison of how close the demographer projected to what our actual enrollment was for this year in October. And unfortunately this year with COVID, we did see that decrease that we looked at, or that we talked about. So we have our demographer projection for fall of 2020 at elementary was going to be 6,256 students. And this year we ended up with 5,943 elementary students. So that was about 300 students less than what we were anticipating. And then at middle school, we had 3,525 as the projection. The actual enrollment this year was 3,412. For high school, there was a projection of 5,195 students, and the enrollment was actually 5,087. So you can see the totals there at the bottom. And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay, on this slide, we have our student enrollment by ethnicity, and you can see it compared year over year from the last 5 years. So starting at the top, you can see our African American population is about 1.41% for October of 2020. American Indian, Alaska Native is about 0.13% of our student population. Our Asian population is about 47.54%. Filipino, 1.81%. Hispanic, 9.98%. Pacific Islander, 0.21%. White, 32.93%. Students that identify as 2 or more races, 5.44%, and those who declined to state as of October were 0.55%. So you can also see the 1-year comparison and the 5-year comparison. On the next slide, we have this broken down into a picture. So you can see on the right-hand side in the green area, the Asian population is our largest student body. And you can see our white, oh, go ahead. Can you go back for a second? Thank you. Our white population at 32.93%, Hispanic about 10% right there. Okay, go ahead and go to the next one now. Thank you. Okay, so our total district enrollment from TK through 12th grade as of January 25th. So we took another snapshot as of January 25th. So kind of middle of the year. And on that particular date, our elementary enrollment had stabilized and we did not see any enrollment difference from October to January. So some students may have come and some may have left, but the overall total number of students remained the same. And then in middle school, we saw a growth of about 5 students. And then at high school, we saw a decrease of 21. So the change in total district enrollment from October through January was a decrease of 16. Okay, for this slide, for this year, we did add students enrolled in the long-term independent study program. So we have our elementary enrollment as of January 25th, 2021. So on this slide, you can see all of our 9 elementary sites, the total number of students in general ed enrolled at that site, the students who chose to enroll in the long-term independent study program, the number of students in our special education SDC programs at each site, and then our total enrollment and our total overflow. So at the bottom, you can see that we have about 43 elementary students enrolled in the long-term independent study program as of January 25th. Okay, one of the other programs that we have that we're very proud of in PUSD is our dual immersion program over at Valley View. It's a Spanish dual immersion program. And our amazing principal has done a wonderful job of growing our enrollment at that site over the last couple of years. So we now have three classes of kindergarten. You can see that she increased the enrollment there to 70 students this year, maintained most of the enrollment from last year. So she has 67 students in first grade, 59 in second grade, and then 48 in third, 45 in fourth, and 48 in fifth, with a total number of students enrolled in the DI program being 337. Okay, on this slide, we also are providing the long-term independent study enrollment. So for secondary sites as of January 25th, 2021. So we have Hart Middle School, Harvest Park Middle School, and Pleasanton Middle School, each having only a couple of students who chose to enroll in the long-term independent study program. So they had 7, 6, and 8 respectively. You can also see their total general education enrollment, and then their special education, mild mod, or mod severe programs, and then their total enrollment over on the right-hand side. Same thing for Amador, Foothill, and Village, moving down that chart. And at Amador, 26 students chose to enroll in long-term independent study, 12 at Foothill, and 2 at Village. We also have our middle college enrollment. So we have 28 students enrolled in middle college from Amador, 15 from Foothill, and you can see the number of students in our mild mod and mod severe programs at all 3 sites. Okay, we also have a choice area for our high school students. So every year, I think it's usually November, October, November, we send out kind of an email and we ask anyone residing in the choice area which school they would like to attend for their 9th grade year. So generally speaking, it's been about a 60-40 split over the last couple of years, with 60% of students choosing to attend Amador and 40% of students choosing to attend Foothill from that area. So you can see currently on the far right column there, our 9th through 12th grade totals are about that 60-40 split. We completed the survey this year, and we had about 54% of students choose Amador and 46% of students that choose to attend Foothill, with 148 students currently residing in that area for next year. Okay, and that wraps up our presentation for this evening, but we're happy to take any questions or answer anything you may have.
Thanks, Kathleen. Do I have questions from the trustees? Mary Jo?
So with 414 students that we're losing, how much money will that cost the district, and will there be a reduction in force of teachers? I'm asking, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, that's a great question. So the state is holding our ADA funding to the 2019-20 fiscal year for the current year and for next year. So the funding challenge will come into place in 22-23. And so we're hoping that there will be a slight recovery in our enrollment, but we are planning for that some level of loss of funding in that year. So that's something we're watching closely, and it'll be reflected in our budget planning.
Okay. And then Julio, do you expect any reduction in force for teachers?
So we do expect some reduction in force. The practice in our school district, which is an item that's being presented to the board tonight, is that we typically release all of our temporary staff. So we do not see an impact for our probes nor our permanent staff. We fortunately have enough temps to be able to cover any loss, although any loss of our teachers is an investment loss because we invest a great deal of time and money in our induction program to be able to support our teachers. So we traditionally do bring back as many teachers as we can, but it does give a cushion for the district in the way of either shortness of labor, which is work, which is enrollment, or money. So unfortunately, sometimes we do need to release temps and we don't ask them to come back. That said, our special needs are hard to fill, are usually positions that we ask that they return sooner than later, so we give them an assignment. All this is explained to our temps when they're hired, and I met with them on the 12th to explain the process to them as well. So although we do expect some cuts depending on the enrollment, and of course if the enrollment turns out to be higher, and then we obviously need to cut less. And again, unfortunately at this point, the numbers do look like we're going to have some level of cuts at the elementary school level.
And my last question was, I heard that some kindergarten parents were keeping their kids home during the pandemic, but they were going to enroll them next year. We haven't had our kindergarten roundup yet, have we, to see if they would bounce back?
Actually, we have had a couple of dates to do the roundup. And Kathleen, did we take a count of how many parents showed up those 2 nights?
We had a great turnout both evenings. We held virtual parent information nights, and actually we asked parents to submit their packets to us by tomorrow. So we're hopeful to have a count here in the next week or so to see how many parents came and signed up. So it was a couple hundred parents for sure that attended, about 600, I think.
Great. Okay, thank you.
That's actually one of my questions, which is, so for the parents who, since kindergarten is not compulsory in California, they didn't have to send their children to kindergarten, but if they are turning 6, they do. So these students who have been kept home or in some other venue, how do we place them? Do we assess them and decide whether they are going to be entered into kindergarten or first grade, or how does that work?
Yeah, I can answer that question. So we work really collaboratively with our teaching and learning team, and as a general practice, we do enroll students by age. So they would, if they're turning 6, they would go into first grade. But we did talk about at the kindergarten and TK parent night, the process that we have to request an exception. So if parents felt like they wanted us to further review their child's in particular case, they would complete a form that we've developed over the last year or so, and submit it back to myself and our Director of Elementary Education, Shay Galletti, and then we review that form with them and often have a meeting with parents as well.
Thank you. I had a question also about the dual immersion program. So I'm looking at the ratios here, and in particular, second grade does not have enough students really for 3 full classes. So how is that handled with that kind of a specialized program when you know, our ratio is 24-1 in those grades, and if you don't have, I mean, so in some other specialized programs that we've had in the past, students would be moved in or out of the program based on the ratios, but in this case, it looks like we just have some smaller classes. Is that correct?
Yeah, Kathleen, I'll take this and please add on. So that's what we're looking at in terms of the projections for next year. One of those grades, so second grade this year's low, so looking into the 3rd grade class next year potentially could be one of those areas that would be reduced, absolutely.
And is there any, I can appreciate the principal's attempts to grow the program in the kindergarten classes, but in terms of what kinds of steps do we take to, to see if we can get students in those classrooms later? Is that possible in the DI program?
Yes, if there's space in the room, it's definitely possible to continue to increase the number of students. in those classrooms. And just as an aside, we did meet today as a DLI team to talk about further strengthening and growing our programs. So it is on our radar.
Okay, great. Because to address Trustee Carrion's point, yes, we would, when districts across the state of California are in declining enrollment and you are constantly in an effort to right size and you're laying teachers off because you don't have enough students to support the classrooms. So yeah, it's a challenge, and one we have not really been in before and one we don't want to be in. So looking forward to the other presentations tonight to hear about that. Are there any other questions for Ms. Reif?
Sure, I have a couple questions. Looking at the 5-year enrollment history, and in particular, of course, for this year, we have 239 elementary student decrease. Kind of adding on to the discussion, do we know offhand if it's more, for example, kindergarten level, first grade, second, for that 239 drop for elementary? Is it, for example, more primary, a big drop in primary versus fourth and fifth grade? Because when you look at the data, you know, our drops aren't as high for middle school and high school. So I'm just curious, due to the pandemic and challenges for, especially for our early learners, and you may not be able to answer that now, but it's just really interesting to look at that because it gives us hope that we might have, you know, a bigger increase for next year, enrollment for first and second grade. So I'm just curious if we could get information with that data at some point.
Yeah, I can briefly answer it now and probably give a more thorough breakdown later. But yes, so for example, we did see a decrease in the transitional kindergarten program. In previous years, we've had waiting lists for that program, and it's been filled to capacity. And this year, we have had roughly 23, 24 openings the entire year. So we saw a small drop in each class throughout the district, and very similar at the kindergarten level as well.
Okay,
so I do
thank you.
Parents with TK and kinder, younger students looked for those preschool programs, keeping their students maybe where they already were or keeping them at home.
Okay, that makes sense. So I just have one other question about overflow. And I guess my question is, it seems that there's a couple schools where it pops out where there's been overflow at Donelon, for example, Hearst, and Walnut Grove. Just from my knowledge, is that typically the particular schools that have overflow for elementary, or does that ebb and flow from year to year? Because that can impact on just information for you know, additional schooling and areas for potential overflow with housing. So I just was curious.
Yeah, in the last couple of years, the most impacted schools in elementary have been in North Pleasanton. So up at Donlin, Fairlands, Livingston, kind of up in that area. That's where we've had our most impacted programs. But it does vary by grade level.
Okay, all right. Thank you. Those are all of my questions right now.
I did want to ask one follow-up. I know you shared some of this information in one of the board updates, but so we of the students that we have lost this year, would you say that the largest percentage of them have gone to private school, or are they moved away, or do we know what the breakdown is?
I do. I have it here. Hang on. So we pulled the data starting from March 15th, 2020, so last March. And from that time moving forward, we had 530 students disenroll from the district. The largest percentage of students who have left, or 200 total, so that's 37.7, left for another school within the United States. So they've left this area here and gone to another school in the United States somewhere. The next largest groups of students, 145 of that 530, or 27.3%, transferred to a private school. And the final largest group, 132, or 24.9% transferred to a school outside of the US, meaning they left for another country. And we've heard that a lot too, that some students have moved out of the area and are planning to come back, but are maybe living with family in another country for right now. The final 10% of students had various other enrollment exit reasons, kind of a wide variety of things, including medical, miscellaneous, early graduations, those types of things.
Steve?
Kathleen, you might have answered this, but of the 100 plus that transferred to private schools, were most of those this year? The pandemic year?
I believe so, yes, but I actually didn't break it down from March to May and then for this year, but I can do that. And put it maybe in a board update.
Okay, great. Thank you.
President Larson, can I ask one more question to that? I think it'd be helpful to know grade level band for that, who left, because it will be more telling if it was more elementary or those really early grades versus secondary. It'll just give a better projection for potentially future re-enrollment for that uptick upward.
Great. I think that's all the questions that we have. Thank you for the report. Anything else, Dr. Haglund, on that? Okay. Item 12.2, report discussion of possible action on the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee's 1920 annual report. Mr. Sheikh Islami?
Good evening, board members, staff, and community. We are pleased to present our Citizens Bond Oversight Committee report. This report will be presented by our chair of the committee. Before I present Arnie Olson, the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee is established through Proposition 39, and the district voters approved back in November 2016, Measure I-1, and that required the establishment of the CBOC committee. That CBOC committee has been operating since the passage of that, and that's a group of parents and community members, and their main task is to meet regularly and provide annual reports to the board. And so this is, I believe, our third report, and our chair, Arnie Olson, who has been with the program from the beginning, will present this annual report to the board. Mr. Arnie?
Thank you, Ahmad. I believe I'm unmuted, so I think you can hear me.
Welcome, Arnie.
Thank you. So you've seen, you probably have a copy of this report in front of you. This page shows the current membership of the committee. It's notable that one vacant position is entitled Bona Fide Taxpayer Organization. To my knowledge, we haven't had anybody fill that slot for a while. I'm old, so I'm representing the senior committee or community, and you can see the other individuals here that are on our board. Next slide, next page, page 3 is essentially our charter, what we're, the purpose of the committee. We are appointed by your board, and we're established under state law. Anytime a bond issue is passed by the citizens, state law requires that a bond oversight committee be established. If you go to slide 4, this really gets at what we do. And you'll notice I have signed this as the chair of the committee. And in this paragraph, it outlines essentially what we do. We review expenditure reports that are prepared by the district. And our purpose is to assure, A, that bond proceeds have been expended only for the purposes set forth in the ballot measure that was passed by the public. Secondly, item B, we attempt to assure that the funds are not used for teacher and administrative salaries and other school operating expenses. And then third, item C, we've reviewed the staff's process for maximizing bond proceeds. Now, how do we do this? Well, we do this by bringing in an outside audit firm, and that firm essentially does two audits. They do a performance audit to look at how the money was spent, and they also do an independent financial audit, look at processes within the financial organization of the district. I'm happy to announce that this year, once again, those audits were totally satisfactory. No adverse findings were developed. And I want to point out that these audits cover the fiscal year from July 1 of 2019 to June 30 of 2020. And later in this report, you'll see various, if we could go to page 10, these are the primary activities or projects that we reviewed in that fiscal year ending June 30 of 2020. You'll see most of these have a green dot, which means the project has, while it has a normal range of issues, we're essentially meeting budget for those projects. The only yellow here is Leidixon, and what that yellow dot means is that the Leidixon budget at that point in time was tight, but the district had ways to deal with those issues and had solutions. So it's good that there are no red dots here. So I'll just close by going to slide 11. Our primary observations here for the fiscal year that we dealt with are listed here. Obviously, COVID-19 has had a negative effect on the district and on teaching and the children. There was one good aspect of COVID-19, and that is that some of the projects were able to proceed faster than normal because the children were not in the classrooms. That's probably the only positive thing I can say about COVID-19 pandemic. But again, the financial and performance audits were completed, and no adverse findings were reported. So with that, I will try to entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Arnie. Do board members have questions? No, very nice presentation, very great news to not only get the performance audits, clean audits, and then also to have the report from the CBOC. So thank you very much for that. Any other comments, Mr. Shakles?
Thanks, Arnie.
Just a thank you. I really appreciate the presentation and the detailed information, high level. It very, very much appreciated. I know it's a lot of hard work, and sometimes, if it's not in the forefront, so I really appreciate the information being provided.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Thank you
very much.
Thank you, Arnie.
All right, now we'll move on to 12.3, which is report and discussion on our math growth update.
Yes, good evening, President Larson, Superintendent Haglund, trustees, cabinet, and Pleasanton community. Item 12.3 is a report and discussion on the 2020-2021 Measures of Academic Progress, also called MAP, Growth Update. This report pertains to the academic progress that has been observed between the fall and the winter assessments, which are now completed. Dr. Pam Vandekamp, Director of Assessment and Accountability, will be delivering this presentation this evening. Dr. Vandekamp?
Thank you, Dr. Woodward. Good evening, President Larson, members of the board, superintendent, members of cabinet, and our Pleasanton community. Thank you for the opportunity to come to you tonight and talk about the results and next steps of our district-wide growth assessment. So, first of all, I'd like to give you a little bit of background information about the Measures of Academic Progress Growth Assessment. This assessment measures achievement and growth in kindergarten through 12th grade math, reading, language usage, and science. And in our district, we focus on the math and reading aspects. It uses an equal interval scale, so a RIT scale, as an estimation of students' instructional level and students' progress and growth. So we can really focus on achievement and growth for all of our students. It's actionable, valid, reliable data that we can use to help target instruction. And it also has a number of instructional content providers that our teachers can use to provide instructional applications. The MAP growth assessment was board adopted in the spring of 2019 for grades 3 through 5 in reading and math, and last year in spring 2020 for grades 6 through 8 in reading and math, and also for our second grade students in math. If we look at the assessments for this year, these assessments were given due to our shelter in place and remote learning. They were all conducted remotely. And I want to start by giving kudos to our teachers, our administrators, students, and families for working together to complete both the fall and winter assessments. This was a concentrated effort on the part of all of our community to make sure that we could gather this information so that we could support students in their further learning. Remote testing and remote teaching is not the ideal learning environment, but we were able to move forward in this collaborative effort, and this contributed to a high percentage of participation for our students. So many thanks to all of those who contributed to this. Just one example of this collaboration was with our second grade teachers at Moore, who reached out to our department and asked for additional support. So we had a Google Meet or Google Hangout available for us, and students could drop into that and receive some technical support. We included our customer support manager from NWEA who provides this assessment. So altogether, we were able to collaborate with parents who were helping their students and the students themselves so that they could get online to do this assessment. So we really appreciate that. We were also able to provide resources for practice tests. And we were also able to provide information for parents and guardians, including the Growth Parent Toolkit. Both the site and district provided support for technology, including our site techs as well, so thanks to them. And we also stressed our board policy regarding academic honesty, because we know that sometimes parents might be tempted to help their students. We wanted to stress that this is a growth assessment, and we really want to find out what students are ready to learn. So working in that environment, we were able to support our students. So I just want to highlight the participation rates. We had a range of participation rates at the elementary and secondary schools, both for fall in math and winter in math and reading. And what I want to highlight as well is the increase in percentage of participation from fall to winter. We see that the highest level, we had almost 100% participation in winter in all areas. And then we saw an increase in all of these areas as well, with the exception of middle school math, where we saw a slight decrease. So just to look at the winter achievement, MAP is really about achievement and growth. So if we look at these results for math, we see that there were a total of 7,127 students that took the assessment in grades 2 through 8 during the winter testing window from December 15th to January 31st. There is a proven correlation between the MAP achievement scores and our CASP, our California Assessment for Student Progress and Performance. And they show in CASP as well as in our MAP Growth Winter Achievement high levels of performance for our students. And what we see here is that overall we have 73% on average of our students who perform in the high average and the high ranges from the 61st to the 100th percentile of achievement. So this is really great news for us, knowing that our students are able to achieve at high rates. When we disaggregate our data somewhat, we also look at the percentages of achievement for our students who are English learners, low income, and students with disabilities as compared with all students. And when we look here, we see discrepancies between our achievement for students. Altogether, we had 639 English learners, 72 low income students, and 276 students with disabilities that took the math assessment. And we see discrepancies of 24% for our English learners, 40% for our low-income students, and 37% for our students with disabilities. So we see that there is still work to do in addressing the needs of our student performance for our student groups. Then if we move on to reading, we see again that a total of 6,307 students took the assessment for reading. And it's not mandatory for second grade, so we're only looking at scores for students in 3rd through 8th grade. Again, we see high levels of performance for all of our students, approximately 74% on average for students who are in the high average and high performance levels. When we disaggregate this data and look at it in terms of comparisons with our English learners, low income, and students with disabilities, again, we see discrepancies between the percentage of students overall, which is 74%, and then the discrepancy with disabilities of 39%. So we do see these opportunity gaps for our students, and this helps us to identify where we can make improvements in our programs and provide additional support through instruction. So I want to spend a little bit of time looking at these next 2 slides, because these are really around student growth. So we've talked about achievement, now we're moving on to measuring student growth. And this is how we can see students are really moving forward, trying to increase their their own growth over time. So if we look at this for math, you can see that the diamonds show the grade level norms projected growth. And grade level norms projected growth are really about the number of RIT points that are expected to increase to maintain their progress towards meeting grade level standards. And it's at the highest level, so the projected growth is 8.8 for second grade, and then it dips down to 3.2 for eighth grade. And this is recognizing that as the learning becomes more complex for students, the expected growth becomes less. What we see here is that the largest gap between the observed growth and the expected growth or projected growth is at second grade. And we also want to go back and think about the achievement levels for our students. Our students are typically high achieving. When we look at the amount of work that's needed to meet these growth levels, we can see that becomes more difficult as students are at a higher achieving level. So this gives us information in how we can approach instruction and programming at the school sites to support students in meeting their expected growth levels. We can celebrate that students for 5th grade, 7th, and 8th grade did meet their projected, and in 8th grade exceeded their projected growth. Again, when we look at this for reading, we see a similar trend where for our students who are in 2nd grade, they are not quite at that projected growth level. And we can see for our students in 7th and 8th grade that they did more or less meet their projected growth. Information and using this data is to provide this MAP Growth Family Report, which is available in Illuminate. There is a MAP Growth Family Report that is on the NWEA report website, but through feedback from teachers, we found that that really didn't meet our needs. It didn't give enough information to our parents and guardians around what that meant and also how they could help their student and support their student. So you can see here we have a 2-page document. We are also able to make changes and tweak this as we go along based on input from our teachers and our administrators. So it starts with, on the left, some information about the assessment itself so that parents and guardians can get an overview of what that means. And then there is information about the individual student achievement, and we have their achievement percentile and their growth percentile for both math and for reading, so that they're able to focus on both of those areas. And then it also breaks that down into particular performance or goal areas. For example, for operations in algebraic thinking and number and operations, measurement and data and geometry in math, for literature, informational text, and language acquisition and use for reading. And we also are able to show the trends, so comparing fall and winter and spring, which we did not have last year, to the fall and winter of this year, so that families can see the comparisons for their student. This also creates a stretch goal for every student so that they can actually move forward in their learning, not just maintain their progress. And finally, we have the instructional applications for families so that there are multiple ways that they can talk with their student and with their teacher about their student progress. And there's also resources here for families through the Family Toolkit and ways to practice the assessment. And this also mentions the digital resources that we have in collaboration with NWEA, such as Edgenuity, Learning A to Z, and StudySync. So our next steps are really to focus on, as we continue to develop the applications of these results, we want to make sure that families have access to this information. Currently, the middle schools have sent out this information to all of their parents, all of their families to review. And at elementary, we've left that to the discretion of the site administrators and teachers as to sharing that. And so I know many of them have, and I've received requests from parents as well. So I know that that information is being shared. In addition, there are key reports in the MAP Growth Reporting Suite so that the teachers and administrators can review this information, both for their grade level, their class, and individual students. And then they can work with their site administrators and intervention specialists to talk together in data talks around what is the application to their instructional learning. And there are a lot of resources that NWA provides for this. In addition, teachers have received training in multiple ways. So we've been able to do that at the request of individual teachers, grade levels, at school sites, and we've done several district-wide trainings as well. And so trying to make this actionable data for them. And we know that this is a process. It is relatively new. And so we continue to provide opportunities to work with our teachers and administrators. In addition, we want to continue to share this information with our Board of Trustees and with our community, and to meet with the administration teams. So one of the things that I've been doing this year is to meet in data collaboration and coaching sessions with our administrative and intervention specialist teams to look at the assessment data and think about what are their impacts to their school plan for student achievement. As a teaching and learning team, we're also reviewing this data so that we can think about the implications at a district level, and we'll continue to provide professional development and support for interventions and assessments. And just some of the applications that have been happening are, in addition to the grade level data talks, are around IEP goal setting and thinking about sharing this with parents and guardians. Finally, I want to highlight the digital integrations that we have and just share some additional information with you around things like Edgenuity. We also have integration with Clever so that students can access the student portal through Clever, through PathBlazer and MyPath. The RIT scores are integrated in, and it can create individualized learning opportunities for our students so that they can do those during asynchronous time. Learning A to Z is at the elementary level, and it also integrates that MAP growth and provides curriculum resources and differentiated instruction based on their RIT score through RAS Plus and then Reading A to Z. And then News ELA or Newsella is available at the middle school, and those scores are shared to create just right reading levels for our students. And teachers can also use that level to differentiate and tailor the instruction. So all of these are ways that this data is actionable for our teachers and our students. So at this time, if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Trustees? Mark?
Okay, a couple of observations, I guess, and in here there might be a question or two. My first observation is that I'm really getting excited about this because for a lot of reasons. You know, I think maybe the adoption and our use of this started out a little slow, but I think the data on here showed like 98% of our students are going through the group math. Okay, that's
Yes.
amazing and fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you, teachers, for doing this, especially online. That's observation number one. Observation number two, it's incredible to me that the uniformity in the percentages at the various levels, low, average, across grade levels. So if you look at like the reading one or whatever, you know, between 3rd and 8th grade, it's between 6 and 11% are low average, and, you know, between 44 and 54 are high, you know, so my observation on that is this must be a pretty good test if it's identifying that kind of breakdown across all grade levels. I mean, these are completely different students taking a test at a very different level, yet it's still showing that we have this kind of, I I don't know if that's a good observation or not. What do you think that is, Dr. Van de Kamp? Why is it so uniform like that? I mean, normally we would see one school being way high and another school, whatever, but,
I think if we disaggregate the data across schools, we would see some differences, but overall it reflects, as I said, it correlates with our CASP, scores. So it's something that we can use as we're preparing. If we drill down into the individual student level, we can look at which students need additional support to be successful on those statewide assessments as well.
Yeah, I mean, and maybe it just goes to show all of our schools are equally great and all of our students are equally, so it's kind of an interesting thing. And the last observation I'll have is maybe not so positive, but I'm just going to say, that the growth gap in the early grades versus the higher grades, I'm going to go on a limb and guess that's COVID related, in that the younger kids are struggling with remote learning to grow as we would expect them to grow. Is that a fair guess, or is this?
I would agree with that. I think that that's been something that's been really challenging and that we've heard from teachers is just, and as a former first grade teacher, I know how important it is to have that relationship, and being in the classroom with students is the best way to do that. I think as students get older, they can adapt more easily. So I agree. I think at the younger grades, that has been just overall a challenging environment for learning. And then for the assessment in particular, it was challenging just to have them acclimated to the assessment. For the older students, they have either done it before, especially our 4th through 8th grade, they've done it before. For the most part, they are more able to navigate that remote learning environment. So I think that was part of it as well. I think that's something that we need to continue to focus on. Hopefully moving back into the classroom for students who do return, it will be easier. And I think for teachers, it was new at 2nd grade as well. So we continue to provide, as I said, I thought that was such a great example. We try to be really open and available as much as possible, answering questions as soon as we can. And so I just appreciate teachers reaching out and asking for assistance so that we can provide that support.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, I'm sure, not a teacher thing. I just think it's hard for these little kids to be remote like that and learn as well. And so if there's no better reason to get these young kids in class than right here. Anyway, that's my comment.
Great, thank you.
Steve?
Thanks, Pam, for your report. I have a couple questions here. How long have we been utilizing MAP?
We started the pilot in April of 2018, and we created it as a kind of an early adopter model. So we opened it up. We had a lot of teachers that participated, especially at the upper elementary and then at the middle school level. And then we did an additional year of the pilot in 18-19. And then in 19-20, we had adopted it for 3rd through 5th grade. And then last spring, as I said, we adopted it for 6th through 8th. So we have been using it for teachers who are interested for a number of years.
Do we have any comparison from year to year? I think Ms. Larson
we can look at the 3rd through 5th grade from last year to this year. But it's hard. It's also just because the testing environment is a little hard, is different, is a little hard. But we can look at the last 2 years for 3rd through 5th grade, but it's hard to compare when we don't have all students participating.
Yeah.
And I believe the spring assessment wasn't given last year, correct?
Correct.
Another question I have is...
Steve, I would just add a comment to that, which is the advantage to this versus comparing year-to-year CAS scores is this, you're looking at the students' individuals' growth during that year. So comparing last year, you'd need to compare the students themselves, their last year's growth,
to the following
not
year.
to a different cohort of growth of that year.
I'm looking at, are we using the correct strategies and so forth to get the growth and proper materials? And the other thing that does bother me a little bit is I look at low average, In third grade, it's 6%. This is in reading now, but also in eighth grade, it's 6%. So I'm concerned that our low achieving students are still low achieving. And I would hope that as we start getting into this, that we'll use what we're learning to raise that. I mean, and then my last question would be on the reading again, and it could be either one. When I look at the grade level norms projected growth, and it's lower than projected growth for our elementary, are we lowering expectations or?
I'll go ahead and take that.
Okay.
And Dr. Vandekamp can jump in if there's a need to do so. We spent some time looking at this because the trend was so surprising to me. And I don't believe we're lowering our expectations at all. I believe actually that as our expectations increase for students to be able to do this test independently in a remote setting, it shows probably an accurate reflection for the second assessment, the winter assessment, is probably a little bit more accurate, I think, because the likelihood is that there was more independence on that one. And so I think as students come back, it'll be very interesting for us to be able to compare the year-end data. Especially, we can look at it for students who are in the classroom and also the students who are not in the classroom, and continue to use this data to inform instruction. So the fact that we had such a high participation rate in the first year of actually requiring this in so many grade levels, and we were doing it in the midst of a pandemic, I think actually speaks to the expectations that are increasing around this assessment.
Okay. I would agree. I'm sure our scores would be higher if we were in class. So thank you.
Yes, I have a couple questions. Popular topic, the RIT growth or the grade level norms projected growth. I just wanted to confirm, is that set standardized by the vendor, or did I hear right that you as a department set that grade level norms projected growth?
No, we don't set that. That is the projected growth is looking at all of the students who take this assessment. That's really what typical growth is expected to maintain their progress towards grade level standards.
So that's,
and that's set by the vendor. That's
okay,
set by NWEA.
Okay, that's what I just needed to double check. So that's a standardized number, correct?
It's a norm reference test.
Norm reference, excuse me, pardon me. So I would be interested to know the trends, because, you know, if that's in general, that gap for second grade, I believe you said that tends to be normal for second grade for the earlier grades. I believe you mentioned that in the presentation. If there is a way to get the data from last year to compare as a snapshot, so we don't make that assumption that it's because COVID related, I think it would just give us a better idea. I love multiple forms of data, and I applaud the district for supporting this type of assessment for growth, because it's really, it helps the teachers get a sense of where their students are and comparing from the fall to the spring. I love it. I did believe I read in the beginning of the presentation that this is also available for language arts. It said language usage. So is there a consideration for using that assessment as well?
The language usage is really around things like grammar, spelling, punctuation, kind of how are they using the language in their reading, and then, I mean, that they would apply to their writing. It is optional. We do have a number of teachers who use that, but we've kept that optional because it is an additional assessment that would need to be done. But I think we can do more to promote that. One of the ways that we do promote that is for our English learners. So especially at the middle school, teachers who provide English language development have taken advantage of that opportunity, and then they can look at that data to see what are ways to support their English learners. And it's very useful for that.
Yeah, I definitely would agree that, you know, multiple measures, and you know, I definitely would encourage that if it's useful for teachers. has there been consideration for, it looks like this test is available up into secondary. Is there consideration to scale up, or is it primarily just to be used as another form of data collection for second grade through 8?
We are also using it at Village. They're using it as a way to measure progress for a group of students, not for all students. And I believe that that's something that they want to expand. We've also talked about using it as the diagnostic for the beginning of the year assessment for 9th grade students as well. And those are conversations that we continue to have.
Great, would love to hear more updates on that. It seems like it's very successful right now for the elementary into the middle school, and so, you know, definitely additional ways that the assessment can be used for all students, all grades. You know, definitely would love to hear more updates on that down the road, so thank you.
We'll do that. Thank you so much.
So, Dr. Vandekamp, you did come to my classroom and help me with
I
my little
remember.
second graders. And so part of the problem was that it was information from second grade all the way up to high school. And so they were really kind of freaking out, but we were able to help them. And so I can imagine being at home without having any encouragement would be a little bit stressful on these little guys. So I think the combination of not having the instruction and not having, you know, reassuring it's okay has resulted, I think, in some of these dips. But that's just my guess. The other thing I wanted to say is that I want to make sure that this information is helpful to teachers. And so I was really encouraged to see that it's linked to A to Z reading, and that's amazing. But I just want to know, is teachers involved? Are they giving feedback? Are they involved in any of the discussions going forward? How will this improve their teaching? That's the goal.
So we've done a lot of work, as I said, collaborating with administrators and then providing opportunities to work with teachers. So any teacher that reaches out to me that has questions or that would like some assistance, would like for us to walk through any of the reports with them, we're happy to do that. Both Glenn Galiste, our assessment analyst, and myself, in addition to our NWEA customer support manager, she's currently providing support for our middle school teachers and administrators, intervention specialists. So we keep developing different ways to provide professional development. My observation has been that, you know, doing that in small groups is really the most effective way because we can answer questions and look at the data together and have those conversations. I think the digital resources are really helpful because it's right there. It's easy to put to use. But we also go into the reports. We look at individual student reports, and we look at classroom and grade level reports. There's a lot of reports, so we try to narrow the number that we provide or that we talk about so that they can, so that we learn over time. And then in addition, I think the family report has been very useful because it lays it out in a really easy way for parents to understand, and then gives teachers the opportunity to have that conversation. So we just continue to work with our school sites, with our site administrators. Again, very appreciative of all the team effort that we've all had. I've just had many conversations with teachers about this as we've been moving forward, working to make it actionable for them and to bring it in a way that's useful.
Don't mean improve their teaching. I mean, make it practical for them, something that they want to use, some information. So are you saying that they're involved in training?
Yes,
if they
very
want?
very much so, that we are continuing to do outreach with the school sites, with individual teachers, responding to any requests that they have. Okay. I had a grade level team, reach out right after the report window closed, and we met and talked about the data, talked about what they could use it for, what were the different, what were the different reports and so forth, and then what could they do moving forward. The way it works is that they can look at their class breakdown, and then from there they move to a learning continuum, which gives them, by grade level standard, the actions and the skills and concepts that students need, that they're ready to learn. And so, and it also breaks it down by student groups. So they can look at small groups, they can look at individual students, and then they can look at the essential standards that they are ready to teach, and what skills and concepts students are ready to learn. I've had administrators who break that out for their teachers based on the essential standards that teachers have provided that they're ready to teach. And so then they can work together to identify those skills and concepts, and then to look at the student groupings.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
President Larson, could I just add something to what Dr. Van Camp's saying? I think that's a really great point, because I think sometimes, an assessment like this can be your best friend or it can be your enemy. Sometimes I know from concerns, from a teaching perspective, you want to make sure that the assessment's useful because it takes time out of instruction to do the assessment. So what you've shared really gives a good understanding for how the data can drill down to impact for the student success. And one just other comment I would like to make is that as a parent, I've been fortunate to receive those reports as a parent for my two children, and have found benefit at looking at those reports. So I know you mentioned that it's been disseminated out a little differently from site to site, but would definitely encourage, whether it be an email out to parents, that there's access to the reports should they want it, because certainly we don't want to inundate families with more information, but I do find that it's beneficial not only for the teachers and how they use that data, but also for parents to really understand what their children are struggling with with reading and math. And so I feel there's a great benefit for those types of reports. So just to share that.
Thank you.
I have a little bit of a different take. So correct me if I'm misremembering from 3 years ago when we first talked about the MAP assessment. But it's the students continue to answer questions until they aren't getting them correct, and they're getting them incorrect. So in other words, a third grader could be continuing to progress through until they hit 9th grade math, for example. So good, that was my understanding. So what I'm more interested in is the individualized learning path. So for the students who demonstrate that they've got mastery of our essential standards for that grade, and they have continued to move through, and they're at that learning point to learn something, way ahead of, what second grade or third grade, for example, is normally teaching. How does this learning plan, individualized learning plan that the student is devising in their stretch goals, how is that working, and how are the teachers assisting the student in moving in that differentiated way?
Thank you. I appreciate that question. So what we want to make sure that it's developmentally appropriate for our students as well. We even though our students achieve at a high level and they're able to answer those questions, and what happens is as they answer them correctly, the questions get more complex. When they answer them incorrectly, they are easier. And so it's really to find that zone of proximal development. What are students ready to learn? Which is why we encourage students to, if they don't know, make their best prediction, because we're trying to find out what are they ready to learn. With that information, teachers can think about how do they apply the depths of knowledge to the student learning. So we don't necessarily want the second grader to be doing the 6th grade math, but we want them to be having, because that's not going to be really developmentally appropriate, but we want them to have opportunities to apply that learning in such a way that they can deepen their knowledge. So as we're talking with teachers about this, we're looking at the grade level, essential standards for their grade level, and then really thinking about how can they apply that understanding to real world problems. Thinking more along things like project-based learning, collaborative projects, things like that, so that they can deepen their knowledge and their understanding rather than continue to move higher up through the grade levels.
So how is the plan developed, though? I mean, are students, is this something that goes to parents with the students' individualized learning path? What is it? I mean, I'm just kind of like the logistics of it a little bit.
So I think that that's in sharing that the family report and having that conversation with parents around what is it that students are learning. And then also having this, if thinking about those digital resources also, and those provide the individualized instruction through the resources.
Okay, well, that's not very project-based, but, so, yeah, I know it's hard, and so I'm asking these questions because we've, in this district, have talked a lot about differentiation over the years. And we just kind of sometimes seem to go in circles a little bit. So I'd like to kind of continue to keep this in the forefront, because this is part of why we wanted this assessment, was not just to make sure that our struggling students move forward, but also so that we provide that differentiation for students who are at that zone of proximal learning, ready to take that next step. So yes, Dr. Woodward.
So in addition to what Dr. Van de Kamp has shared, and thank you, Dr. Van de Kamp, for being so comprehensive in the report and in the answers. Last year, I remember when we were going to school sites and we were talking about MAP, and one of the things that I truly believe is the power of engaging students and setting their own goals. And so the importance of that stretch goal. And when you have students that are in person, you can really do some innovative things with that. And then the students can explore their pathways for trying to get to that point. So I look forward to having more of that happen as we bring students back. In the classroom, a digital app sounds exciting. When you've been in a pandemic for a year and then there's another digital app, it's not quite as attractive. So I look forward to having choices next year as to how students might want to go about stretching themselves no matter where they are on this assessment.
Can I just follow up with that? Thank you, Dr. Woodward. Is that when I think back to last year when we were in person, and through the universal access model, teachers were able to create some of that project-based learning for those students who were on the high achieving end. And so they were doing things like within book clubs or creating some theater. So there were a lot of ways to apply that. And I mean, I think back to that time, I'm sure that that's happening now as well. But it really is around providing across that continuum different opportunities. And so our teachers are doing that, not just focusing on our applying it for the intervention piece, but also really thinking about that enrichment and extension, and then that application.
Thank you, I appreciate that. Are there any other questions for?
President Larson, I just wanted to applaud the teachers for administrating these assessments remotely. I know it's an extremely a challenging time. I know that even, for example, the tech support that was provided to administer the assessments, my daughter was an example where she was having problems getting logged out, and so the additional tech support. So I really would like to applaud the teachers for making this assessment happen. We know that it's a benchmark, it's a snapshot, but to your point, President Larson, it's really important that, that the teachers get the additional training, the additional supports on how to use the data to help, the students if it's going to support that differentiation and alignment. But, it will come. It's a process. And so just, if I'm remembering this correct, this was just adopted recently for 3.5 and then going up 6.8. So, applaud that it's been adopted and it's happening, and we will get to that individualized learning once we get back on site. So, just wanted to share my comments too, because it really is important to remember that, taking on a new assessment takes time, not only for students but for teachers as well.
Great. Thank you very much, Dr. Van Kamp and Dr. Woodward. Now we're on 12.4, and this is on our semester 2 temporary grading policy for students in secondary. It's not 10 o'clock, it's 9:10. Yeah, the clock needs to get fixed.
I was going to say, well, we'll go fast. Okay. So thank you, President Larson. Before the board is item 12.4, which is a report, discussion, and possible action on the semester 2 2020-21 temporary grading policy. This report will be presented by Director of Secondary Education, Ms. Graywall, and this will include the recommendation of how we are proposing to adjust the grading scale for middle school and high school for this next semester. So I'd like to just reiterate before Ms. Graywall begins her presentation that what you'll see tonight was a collaborative effort that occurred with our teachers. We're very thankful for their input and their ideas and their patience as we did various different types of calculations that led us to this recommendation. And it's also an opportunity for us to utilize a growth mindset that leads us closer to equitable grading practices. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Graywall.
Thank you, Dr. Woodward. Good evening, President Larson, Superintendent Haglund, trustees, executive cabinet, Pleasanton community, and staff. Thank you for the opportunity to present this evening. We'd like to begin with acknowledgements. First, our gratitude to our teachers who have dedicated themselves to doing extraordinary things and supporting our students all year. We'd like to thank the committee of secondary teachers, instructional leaders, and administrators who contributed to the discussion about grading practices. And we greatly appreciate the professional expertise that this group brought and shared with us in formulating a temporary grading policy for semester 2 to further support our secondary students. On a personal note, I'd like to thank my colleagues Kim Ortiz and Junior Yee for their support through this process. So our board policy 5121, which is related to grades and evaluation of student achievement, states, PUSD believes that grades serve a valuable instructional purpose by helping students and parents and guardians understand performance expectations and identifying the students' areas of strength and those areas needing improvement. Our committee's work was rooted in this belief. I'd like to share the background of our work. Since August 2020, as you know, our students have been learning remotely, and while many will continue to do so, a number of our students will return to campus for in-person instruction over the next couple of weeks. Due to multiple pandemic-related factors, over this past year, we have seen a significant increase in the number of Ds and Fs for our students, a trend which has been observed across the county, the state, and the nation. To help address this concern, a temporary policy for semester 1 of credit, no credit grades was approved and implemented in January to allow students time to remediate D and F grades and to mitigate the negative pandemic-related impact on their mental health. Additionally, a spring credit recovery program began last week to allow students to remediate semester 1 grades during semester 2. Approximately 200 high school students are enrolled in the program this spring. As the second semester began, teachers continued to implement options for flexible grading practices, including reducing assignment workload, accepting late work without penalty, allowing makeups for missed assignments, and allowing test corrections and retakes to demonstrate mastery of skills and concepts. In an effort to further proactively support students this semester, a committee of instructional leaders representing all 612 schools, departments, and grade levels began meeting weekly in January to discuss grading practices. This group reviewed PUSD data trends and current literature by leading scholars in the field, including Douglas Reeves, Joseph Feldman, and Rick Wormelli. The committee also analyzed various grading policy options based on the research and suggestions received from teachers within this group. Topics discussed include equitable grading practices, the impact of zeros on the grade book, and possible changes to the grading scale for C, D, and F grades. After each weekly meeting, the committee's work was shared with all 6th through 12th grade teachers to solicit their feedback, which they could share with their department representatives, their administrators, or directly with teaching and learning staff. All feedback received was reviewed very carefully by teaching and learning and taken into account when planning each subsequent committee meeting. The committee discussed several options for changes to the grading scale, but we'll focus on the recommendation that we are bringing forward tonight. Based on 60% down to 50%. Please note that this proposal would only impact D and F grades and have no effect on A, B, and C grades. Since our student information system is limited in its ability to test the various grading scale options under consideration, our team developed a calculation tool to assess the impact of each option on a sample data set. The data set included 30 grade books, PUSD grade books, with a wide distribution of A through F grades, and it represented all 612 schools, departments, and grade levels. The image on this slide illustrates the impact of applying the D at 50% policy to those grade books, where a decline in the F grades and an increase in the D grades is observed with no change in A's, B's, or C's. This same analysis was repeated for each grading scale model examined by the group. I'm going to apologize in advance for the busyness of this slide, but we also created a grades calculation tool available and made it available directly to teachers so they could assess the impact of each grade. Just one example of one grade book using this tool. Please note that this is not holistic data for all of secondary. The table at the top here shows a snippet of sample scores for 6 students in a particular class, and the calculation of each student's, after their scores have been entered, the calculation of their point total and their percentage grade in that class, the current letter grade in that class, and then that's compared to the adjustment applied of changing the D to 50% and how that impacts the letter grade for that student. Down below, this table here shows a summary of the distribution of letter grades by the number and the percentage of each grade for this class before and after the adjustment was applied for D at 50%. And you can see here the percentage change between the two models. You'll notice that the A's, B's, and C's remain unchanged, and the F's have declined by 67%. The D's have increased. Here, finally, the graph shows for teachers a pictorial representation of this table on the left for those who are more visual learners, and you can see that the D's and F's have changed in comparison to before the change was applied and after, but the A's, B's, and C's remain consistent. So this calculation tool was made available to all secondary teachers to allow them to assess the impact of After third quarter progress grades were posted in February, we then compared the number of D's and F's in 2021 to the same period last year. We noted that while D's have been fairly consistent for both high school and for middle school, the increase in the number of F's at high school is close to 60%, and the increase in middle school is close to 52%. Which further demonstrates the need for action to support students who are receiving failing grades or Fs at this time. As we shared with trustees after semester 1 in January, we once again analyzed the data by student group to determine the number of secondary students with Ds and Fs in multiple classes. This table displays the distribution of the numbers of Ds and Fs for each demographic group, grouped by 1, 2 to 4, or 5 or more D or F grades. Please note, this data only represents those students in each demographic group who received a D or F or multiple Ds or Fs. Overall, across all demographics, of the total number of students in each group with Ds or Fs, many students had multiples of those grades, as you can see on the right side of the chart. This chart represents the percentage of secondary students with D's or F's in each demographic group, and it further demonstrates the disproportionality among our historically underserved groups. For example, if we look at American Indian and Alaskan Native students, who make up a small number in our district, we see that of the 26, these are secondary students, nearly 62% of them have at least one D or F. Similarly, for our Black African American students, who make up 162 secondary students, 71% have at least one D or F. These numbers are much higher than those observed for our Asian students and our white student populations. We also reviewed Q3 D and F progress grades received by each student last year compared to this year. The percentage of students with one D or F has declined here from 57% to 47.7%. The percentage of students with 2 to 4 has increased slightly from 40 to 43%. And the percentage of students with 5 or more has more than tripled from 2.3% to 9.2% of our students with 5 or more D's or F's. That number is 221 students at the secondary level. And these trends have been a concern all year. Our data analysis and the work of our Grading Practices Committee has led us to a proposed temporary policy recommendation for semester 2 that is rooted in our focus on equitable outcomes for students, since we recognize that not all students have had the same access and opportunity to excel during remote learning. Thus, we propose adjusting the grading scale for the D from 60 to 69% to 50 to 69%. So from a 10-point spread to a 20-point spread for Ds. This adjustment would also change the grading scale for Fs from 0 to 59% to 0 to 49%, a change from the 60-point spread to a 50-point spread. The goal of this policy is to allow students who receive an F grade on the current traditional grading scale to potentially pass a class with a D and thus qualify for graduation credit, which would also help to mitigate the negative impact on their emotional health. Please note that students who have earned passing grades of A, B, C, or D, and those who have earned an extra grade weighting in advanced placement and honors level courses with A, B, and C grades will not experience a change due to this policy. Also note that the policy will be implemented for all students, including students who receive special educational related services through an individualized education plan or a 504 plan. We are hopeful that in addition to our teachers' continued supportive grading practices, this policy will suffice to address the needs of our students who are struggling the most at this time. If this policy achieves our goal, which we will be able to better assess after Q3 grades are posted in mid-March, it would not be our intent to bring another temporary grading policy forth for semester 2. For the long term, our committee plans to continue its work in reviewing overall grading practices this spring and into next year. Our discussions will be framed around equity for all students while also examining the current disproportionate outcomes for our historically underserved student groups. In that work, the committee will determine if any long-term adjustments to the grading scale will be needed. Additionally, they will evaluate traditional grading practices such as assessing compliance, other non-academic behaviors, and homework completion. They will also examine incorporating multiple opportunities for students to demonstrate understanding, standards-based grading practices, and ensuring grades provide meaningful feedback for students and document their progress. And with that, this infographic summarizes the proposed temporary grading policy for semester 2 as described in our presentation this evening. We thank you for your time and we welcome your questions.
Thank you, Namarta. Questions? Mary Jo, you're looking.
I just really appreciate the fact that teachers are getting together during this pandemic and actually working on this, because I know it takes a lot of time, and I just appreciate your effort. I'd just like to maybe see it expanded to maybe include some students. I don't know if students have been involved in what their thinking is, what's making it more challenging, what would be more helpful. So that's my only question or comment, is that how do we include more students?
Yes, our plan is this initial group that we pulled together very quickly, and I echo your statements, Trustee Carrion, in that our teachers have been phenomenal in giving us time every week for a month to meet about these topics, which are very important, always timely, but difficult to address in the middle of a pandemic. But for the long-term grading practices discussion, we would like to involve additional stakeholders, including students for certain. Thank you.
Trustee McCashy?
Yes, I have a couple questions. Could you pull up the grades calculation tool slide for a minute, please?
Sure, give me 1 second. Yes, there you are.
Did you say the 6-student analysis, the grades calculation tool, is that a real student or is that fictitious?
This is an actual collection of scores from an actual grade book in a secondary classroom. This is a snippet. So the class probably had about 35 students in it. I just took a screenshot of the first 6 scores in that class to illustrate the tool that we developed so teachers could do their own check with the tools because they wanted to see how this would impact their grades distribution.
Okay, so I just have a couple observations. So when I looked at that grade book in greater detail, I noticed that the students who had D's and F's had a range between 5 and 6 zeros. Now, what I don't know is why the student got the 0, whether it was they didn't turn in the homework on time or they didn't understand the concept. But then if you look at the student that got the F, I counted that student had 16 zeros. And that's really alarming in terms of, just additional questions on drilling down on the why and on what's going on. Is it a homework policy issue or, why? Because as the research has shown, and Dr. Woodward has done a great job highlighting, working with the grade committee, really looking at some of the research, but there's research that shows that, if a student gets 1 or 2 zeros, it's very hard to recover from that. So it's just an observation of the data that I think should be looked into. And then I do just another observation. If you could go to the student demographic data for quarter 3 progress grades slide.
Is this the one you had in mind?
Do the next one where it's the quarter 3 progress overall demographics. Yes. Okay, great. This is just another observation. A few board meetings back, Dr. Woodward gave a report for quarter 1 demographics. And what's standing out here is the disproportionality of the minority groups, in particular for the American Indian Alaska, the Black African American, and Hispanic, as well as other. And so it's just another observation that I think would be really helpful when working with the Grading Practices Committee to have those conversations on implicit bias. Now, I know and I applaud the district because I know what the comprehensive coordinated early intervention service plan, I know that the district is looking at the disproportionality, but what I'm seeing here is that it's not only being reflected on suspension rate and the early intervention program that the CCEIS attacks, but this is looking across the board at the grading system in place. And so I think it would be a great opportunity because I really applaud Dr. Woodward and the entire teaching and learning team in working with the teachers and the administration to work on this grading policy, but it's just some observations and looking at that data that just really popped out to me. So I do have a point to this. Dr. Woodward, can you share a little bit more about the success work in working with the grading committee and some of the I don't know, kind of the ahas and things that working with the teachers and looking at the grading process that kind of popped out?
Absolutely. I really do want to just give credit to Director Graywall and Junior Yee and to the teachers, because they have just done an amazingly skillful job during this committee in gathering the resources. So some of the comments that we've been hearing during the discussion, there has been discussions about the homework and how that applies in terms of the ideas about intervening for students, teaching them responsibility, equipping them to be successful in upcoming grade levels, but at the same time looking at a grading system that is somewhat archaic and does not necessarily reflect the standards and the opportunities that we want students to have. So I think that maybe answers a few of those questions, and Director Graywell might want to add in with any other information.
Well, I would just add, thank you, Dr. Woodward, that the points that Trustee McCaughey makes are all relevant, valid. They actually did come up in some of our conversations. I just want to reiterate that we had a very short window of time to pull the committee together, to hold weekly meetings, to share data and research. We asked a lot of our teachers in a very short amount of time. And then amazingly, this group of 100 people came to consensus around one proposal that we could implement immediately and have an impact this semester. And the understanding was, though, and we mentioned this at the beginning of that committee, the work of the committee was that we would continue having long-term discussions. We have several school sites that are already holding their own committee grading practices committee discussions, and they would like to continue that work. So, you know, we need to plan what that's going to look like, the structure and all the stakeholders that will be involved, but definitely all of the factors that you've mentioned will be included in the conversation.
Thank you. I really applaud the hard work that's been done. I just have one last question about the actual recommendation compared to what was approved for semester one. Can you talk through a little bit about why the non-credit credit is not being recommended for this policy, for this temporary policy for this semester two?
Absolutely. So when we approved the policy for semester one, it was after the semester had basically ended, but before the teachers had posted their grades. Several things have changed since then. So we've been able to do these kind of calculations in advance, meet with the team, and begin to shift a grading scale. Even though it's temporary, it provides us with opportunities to see the impact of this and potentially have a long-term effect. So given that, another thing that has changed is that we have offered up the students now to be able to return to school. So we know that it was the impact of the working in isolation during remote learning that led to the decline in the grades, prompted by the pandemic. So now, as we open the doors of our schools and students who we hope will return, especially those who have struggled in accessing remote learning, then that provides another layer of intervention for them as they can now be in person, at least for part of the time. So given that, and given that we wanted to have ample time to implement this grading scale, even prior to moving into the third quarter, we can have the chance to see the impact on the grades and the reduction of the F grades compared to the first semester. So it would be too early for us to move to that at this point in time. We're also anticipating that this would be effective and it might reduce the need to even visit the credit or no credit ultimately. That is our goal.
Thank you. I have another question, but I'll let some other trustees speak and then you can come back to me. Thank you.
Steve?
But Martha, did you look at students with IEPs and 504s and our EL students, how they're doing?
We did, and I think I might have that data in terms of their performance in classes compared to their peers and their grades looking at last year. So students in special education make up just under 8% of our total student population at secondary, but they have close to 14% of all progress reports, meaning they, at Q3 progress, they earned a D or an F. And our English learners make up about 4.5% of our secondary population, and their progress reports, they make up 7.5%. So they are disproportionately, both groups are represented in greater numbers in progress reports.
Do we share that with the program specialists and with their case managers and so forth?
We will. Yeah. We were just pulling the data together. The progress report grades were just posted about a week ago.
If I just might add to that, Trustee Maher, is that whenever we're looking at achievement of any kind, whether we're looking at MAP scores or we're looking at grades or we're looking at any other assessment, when we review the data as a teaching and learning team and then talk about it with our administrators, we definitely have we are always taking those deeper dives to look into what does this tell us for our student groups, and is there evidence based in the data that there is additional work that we need to do long-term in terms of equitable practices, and the resounding answer is consistently yes. So we will continue to look at the various student groups in order to identify gaps and determine solutions.
Well, what I'm concerned about, and with the pandemic, of course, it enters a lot of problems, but accommodations need to be followed. Sometimes they're not because of the pandemic, quite frankly. And I just have concerns with 14%, you said, Namarta?
14% of the progress reports. Yeah.
And 8% are students with the...
Of the population. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I appreciated we asked a lot of questions on this item ahead of time, but the different interventions that staff has been reaching out to families, and the cohort supervision and student study teams and all those things. And I know we can't tell families to come back necessarily, but being that we believe so much of the problems with the Fs have to do with the remote teaching, remote access to the learning. Have we had conversations with the families to say, your child really needs to be in class?
So we realize that the selection of remote or hybrid is a very personal decision for our families. So the advocacy that occurs is just reaching out to those families in order to ensure that they're aware of their choices and the benefits of, that if the student is suffering from the isolation and the lack of engagement in remote learning or has had a hard time accessing that instruction, then the opportunity to have that face-to-face, albeit with a mask from a distance, but still it's a social setting where they can be also engaged in a highly structured environment, is something that's being shared.
Okay. So please, if you're watching this, have your student come to class. So the other I don't know, comment that I would like to ask or make. We also have received emails from other parents who have children who are receiving grades lower than they would normally have received in a in-person setting. And so they would, their desire is that, there be some, adjustment to everyone's grades as opposed to what we're doing here tonight. And is it fair to say, we talked about the disproportionality, we talked about the equity, but in reality, I think what we're really talking about here is trying to make it possible. When you just cut it right down to the thing, what we're trying to make possible is for students to graduate. And that's why we're doing this temporary grading policy. Is that fair?
Yes, that is correct, and that is why we like this particular option, because it didn't adjust the A's, the B's, or the C's, but it does make it possible for a student to potentially walk across the stage. At the same time, we all know that colleges do not accept D's. So it's not that it's not giving students any unfair advantage, it's helping them graduate.
So I just wanted to be very clear about that for the public, so that it's not necessarily what you want to hear in terms of your students who, again, are maybe not getting the grades that they would normally get in in-person instruction. We know how challenging this year has been for everyone. And then the other comment I'd like to make is about the long-term work of the committee, so which I applaud, but I also hope that with the teacher involvement in this, there are some systemic things that need to change, because just telling a teacher, and I can't speak for all teachers, just the ones that I've talked to, just saying, okay, well, we're going to, you need to change to allow students to, resubmit their work and make corrections. And so you've added now just a really, especially at secondary when they have, 6 classes, and now you've had ultimate opportunities for students to resubmit work, and then you have to regrade it, and then you're doing, it's a lot of extra stuff. And so you have to, in order to allow for that, the learning to happen and for them to demonstrate that they've learned that, we have to somehow change the inputs or it's just, so that structure, all that structure has to change too. And so I just hope that that's being considered as well, and not just, you guys need to, allow students to turn things in 5 times, because that's just not sustainable.
President Larson, if I could just address a couple of things, if you don't mind. To your first point, what we noticed in our data, and we saw this at the semester grades, and it was repeated again, actually at the quarter 2, which is semester, and then recently in the progress grades, the number of A's, when you talked about the students who maybe are not doing as well as they would like, and I am very sympathetic to that group that's, maybe struggling slightly, but, not failing. But I will say that the number of A's are definitely up during the pandemic. So students who are doing well, and I think even the number of B's was higher than it has been in previous years. So a fair number of our students are doing okay in these circumstances, even though I know that not everyone is feeling as successful. And then to your second point about the larger conversation, what we'd like to do is really root that discussion in research and in data. And so what we'd like to do is approach it from the standpoint of reading the literature, finding the most current research, and really examining our practices based on that. I don't want to come to it with a preconceived notion, and it was hard in the short 4-week period that we met to even create this policy to not come to it with some preconceived notions, but we did our best to be very open-minded. We read the research, we saw where it took us, and then the committee came to consensus based on what they saw at that time. Now again, it was an abbreviated time period. So for the longer term discussion, I understand our neighbors to the north in San Ramon are having similar conversations, and it can take a while. These are not short conversations. They should be carried out very thoughtfully with careful planning. And we want to, if we go this route, we want to do it right, and do right by our students and do right by our staff as well, because grades do tell our story as a district. So it's important that we do this the right way.
Thank you. Back to Kelly Mukashi, you had something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, well, I would just add, it's like a peeling an onion. We're talking tonight about the grading policy, but long-term, as mentioned, having conversations with administration, teachers, including the students. Our instruction has changed right now, so we have to also think about the types of assessments that are being put into that grade book to get those grades. So, digital portfolios, performance tasks, more performance-based assessments where students can demonstrate their learning in different ways. We haven't talked down to that level tonight, and it's not time tonight, but I think that's really important to consider for conversations. short term, I do think I'd love to hear in future communications to the board additional action steps for the students that are currently failing. I believe on the page, on one of the slides, that we have a 59% increase for high school for Fs right now. And so I'd love to hear, some more of those immediate interventions for our students that are failing right now, in addition to any change of our grading policy tonight, so that we can get as many of those students from failing to graduating and passing. So that is just my, whether it's, small group interventions for those students. I don't know what options could be considered, additional instructional supports. I don't know if the staffing can accommodate that, or additional services, but any additional strategies or interventions to support those students so we can get more students passing.
I was doing the math. Are there any other comments or questions? Are we ready to move to a motion? Mark, I see your finger on the...
I was going to move to approval of the temporary grading policy for semester 2.
I'll second it.
All right, it's been moved and seconded to approve the temporary grading policy for semester 2 and for students in grades 6 through 12, yes. Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Trustee McCashy?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Maher? Aye. 5-0. Thank you guys very much for that in-depth conversation about this. And what? Time? I know, that was what I was counting. So we need a motion, since we're in between items, we still have a few minutes. Thank you, Mrs. Graywell, that was great. We have a few more items to go over, and I'm looking at more than an hour of items. So I move that we extend the meeting to no later than 11:30.
I'll second it.
Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Kashi?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Maher?
Aye.
Aye. All right. 11:30, but let's try to get out by 11.
I second that.
All right, item 12.5, HVAC.
Great. We will keep ours less than 5 minutes, and I will turn it over to our Director of Facilities and Construction, John Chwastek.
Thank you, Ahmad. Good evening, everyone, board members, superintendent, community. Tonight, this item is for the Harvest Park Gym HVAC replacement design services with Sugimura Finney Architects. We call them SFA for short. They're in a pool of the architects, and they're working on current sites right now with HVAC and other things. This is a continuation of HVAC roofing projects within the district of Measure I-1. And in the summer of 2020, Building B of Harvest Park actually did receive the HVAC roofing upgrades, but it was only a piece of what needs to be done there. In fact, this summer in 2021, we are doing another package that has already been approved by the board in December. And that is going to do the rest of the buildings except for the gym. The gym is a joint use facility, and so it has had some problems over the years, and they basically did piecemeal repairs for the last group of years. And this is a proposal for actually fixing all of it. And the costs we're looking at working with the city to get them to contribute some of the costs as well. But it will be a bond project for what the district proposes work here. The scope of work is to demolish the existing 4 boilers in the area, but also put a more economical system in, which is air handling units. We put those on the ground. And so it'd be an economical approach, but still very satisfactory to serve the needs of the gymnasium that's very cold during the winter. So the recommended action is the administration recommends the board to approve the agreement with SFA Architects on the design services for Harvest Park Gym.
Thank you, Mr. Chostek. Questions, Steve?
This is also AC, John?
Excuse me?
This is also AC?
Yes, it is. It's air conditioning and ventilation, heating.
Well, that'll make 8th grade promotion much more comfortable.
Yeah, I was going to say, this is long in coming, and
overdue.
I strongly support this one. So.
All right, I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll move approval of the agreement for gym HVAC replacement design services with SFA at Harvest Park Middle School.
Second.
All right, we have one absent. Carry on. Trustee McCashy? Aye. Miller?
Aye.
Maher?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thank you very much, John. All right, so now we'll move on to 12.6, and that is report, discussion, and possible action for the Chromebook for secondary. Ms. Nichols?
Amy?
Good evening, members of the board, cabinet, and community. Thank you for the opportunity to recommend the purchase of devices tonight for the 4th year of our Student Device Initiative. This program is funded by Measure I-1. Tonight, I am recommending the purchase of 2,700 devices. These devices will be distributed to our incoming 6th and 9th graders in August at the start of the next school year. These students will keep the devices and use them at home and at school until they leave middle and high school respectively. Our current 8th grade students, our rising 9th graders, currently have a device that they received 3 years ago when this program first began. These 3-year-old devices will be collected at the end of this year, and our middle school site techs will clean and provide any necessary repairs to these devices over the summer. These devices will then be distributed to the elementary schools for use by our younger students for the next 2 years, as we can typically get about 5 years of useful life from a Chromebook. We anticipate providing more than 1,000 devices to our elementary students as a result of this process. The devices we will collect back from this year's 12th graders will be used as spares in our secondary schools. Measure I-1 funding has been allocated to support this program through the start of the 2025-26 school year. The model we are using this year, where incoming 6th and 9th graders will receive these new devices, and the devices collected from our departing 8th graders will be provided to our elementary schools, with those high school devices being used as spares, is intended to be repeated each year for the remainder of this program. The take-home device model is defined in our current technology plan, which we plan to update in the coming school year. We also plan to look at strategies we may be able to utilize to provide additional devices to our elementary schools, as well as ways we may be able to sustain and enhance this program using other funding sources than our bond. So in closing, I welcome your questions and feedback, as well as any we might receive from our community, and respectfully request that you consider approval of the purchase of the devices per the attached quote. Thank you.
You know, Mr. Gannon, I have neglected to ask if we've had public comment. I hope you were felt free to jump in at any time if there's any items.
I do, President Larson. We have one for this item.
Okay. I know, I was like, we haven't had any public comment. This is very strange. Why don't we go ahead with the public comment first this time?
All right. Devancha, if you're there, take it away.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. Good evening, trustees, superintendent, member of the cabinet, and everyone in the community here watching today. I would like to address the board on the purchase of secondary take-home Chromebooks and offer a student perspective that may not have been expressed before. While I commend the board and superintendent's cabinet, especially Ms. Nichols, heavily on their concern for computer equity and utilization of technology to improve education, I have serious concerns about the wastefulness of this project. A large number of students in the district, to my knowledge, already possess their their own internet-connected devices. Furthermore, as someone who has gone directly through the process, I can tell you how difficult it is to opt out of receiving a school Chromebook. My question is, why is our system of issuing Chromebooks opt out rather than opt in? And moreover, while there are benefits to this, why is it so difficult to opt out of this program? The district is spending almost $1 million measure I-1 funding in this proposal to issue Chromebooks universally to secondary school students, but I believe that there is a significantly better way to utilize this funding. First, opting out of receiving a Chromebook should not be hidden in the fine print of registration in a sea of endless check marks that many parents skim through. Instead, emails should be sent to all secondary parents asking them if they want to opt out of their student receiving a Chromebook. In lieu of this, there are many other options we can consider, but the point is that opting out should be easier so that we do not waste funding on those who do not necessarily need a Chromebook. We must use the funds saved from purchasing a number of laptops from students who don't want or need them to target low-income and otherwise at-risk students with innovative technological programs. If this is not possible due to logistical and other issues, then we should utilize these bought Chromebooks in elementary schools and others if they are not needed by some secondary school students. The district has an imperative to serve its students as best it can, and I believe a significant chunk of I-1 funds can be utilized to far greater effect here. Thus, I urge that the board spend more time deliberating this action and creating a plan for how funds could be utilized more effectively before approving this proposal to buy a large number of laptops or give them to a specific population. Thank you.
Thank you to the speaker. Board members, do you have questions and comments? Mary Jo.
I just love that. I never, ever thought about that before. So is there an answer to his question about opting in instead of opting out, or?
Ms. Nichols, do you want to address that?
Sure, yeah. We have historically used the online registration process because it's an effective way of querying our parents and receiving that consent through that process as they are consenting or providing their input and acknowledgments on other questions that are associated with the start of the school year. We could absolutely augment that or look at adding additional communication that would be sent home to our parents to support that if that were the will of the board. One thing I would like to mention is that students or parents are able to make the choice to turn in a device at any time. So even if they chose to take one at the start of the year, or if they, perhaps inadvertently checked that box to accept the Chromebook at the start of the year, there would be no issue with turning that device in at any time.
Well, I do think it brings up a good point. Have we surveyed families on which high school students need Chromebooks, or perhaps their families have other computer devices that might have other bells and whistles, and maybe they don't want the Chromebook? Has there been any data surveyed on a need for the secondary students? Do we have that data?
We haven't done that survey in the last year or so, and it does go back to the start of the program. The district, prior to beginning this program, actually had a very robust BYOD program where students would bring their own devices and participate in learning using their own devices for the most part. And that is still something that students can absolutely do at any time if they prefer to do so. So we make this available to all students in the district. But again, at any time, students would be able to opt out or make the choice not to participate with the program. One thing that is true is that there's a lot of value to having a consistent and uniform approach to the devices that are used, because it allows us to provide additional tools and additional enhancements because these are personally owned devices. So I'll give you an example of one of the areas, because these are district-owned devices. One of the areas where this is true is there's a type of software that will allow teachers to provide kind of oversight or even remote control of student devices when they're in classrooms. This is securely software or Go Guardian software. These are some of the terms. And we've been looking very closely at the use of this software in the district over the last couple of years because it would help give teachers another toolkit in their classroom management toolkit to make sure that students are staying on task. And this is one of the strongest benefits to actually using district devices. So being able to provide that consistent approach and use some of these tools is one of the reasons that there are definite benefits to using a consistent district issued device.
Thank you.
Honestly, a case could be made that you could only use district devices. That certainly at my work, you're not still allowed to bring your own devices. That is the way things are going. But there's an issue that was raised, I don't know if it's in this or in the questions and answers about support. There's very little support that district personnel can provide to a BYOD, and other than maybe Wi-Fi connectivity and stuff like that. So I guess the question then is that how many of these devices are sitting in the warehouse going unused at this point? And if the answer to that is 0, then I think that's a pretty good indication, unless people are, bringing them home and not doing anything with them. So that would be another data point.
Steve, do you have anything?
I will move.
Yeah, well, hold on, I do have a comment on that too, just because Mark and I have been here for this project the whole time. So we have addressed this issue many times, and for the very same reasons that Ms. Nichols and Mark mentioned. And yes, of course, families can continue to use a device that their student wants, or maybe they can use that device at home and they do take a Chromebook so that they can use that in class. But a true one-to-one device program needs to be, for support reasons, for equity reasons, for a lot of reasons, needs to be uniform. And yes, but we are still allowing for the opt-out. So maybe it's a little difficult, too difficult, and Ms. Nichols, I'm sure, will look into that. But where would we be if we didn't have this program we started with Measure I-1, which we specifically put into Measure I-1. These are not funds that were decided on later and moved from another thing. This was from day one of talking about the bond and what voters approved. So that's what I'll say about that. You were going to make a motion, Mark?
I was going to move approval of purchase of secondary take-home Chromebooks for 21-22.
I'll second it.
Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Makashi?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Maher? Aye. 5-0. Thank you, Ms. Nichols. 12.7, Resolution 2021.18 for release of temporary certificated employees.
Yes, good evening, President Larson, trustees, Superintendent Haglund, staff and community. Before the board is item 12.7, which is the release of our certificated employees. Under California Education Code Section 44954B, states that the board may release a temporary certificated employee if the employee is notified before the end of the school year of the district's decision not to re-elect the employee for the next succeeding school year. So annually, we present to the board the release of our temporary employees, and then we bring them back depending on the need of the district. If we have a shortage in enrollment or we have a shortage of funds, we need to make a decision if we're bringing them back or not. It protects having to have a shock in the system in the way of layoffs of our permanent staff or our probationary staff. So there is a shelter that the district exercises to be able to prevent that layoff and that shock in the system. So this year, unfortunately, as we look at our enrollment, there may be a possibility of having to not bring back staff versus release some of our probes as well as our permanent staff. But our intention is to try to get our staff that are temporaries back if we can. So I did meet with the temporary staff on February 12th, and spoke to them about the process, spoke to them about the practice that we have. But even prior to that, Ms. Andy Antipas, who is our coordinator one for certificated staff, did meet with the staff and explain to them what the process is so they're aware of it. Credentials that are special ed, physics, hard science, math, those usually get an invitation as an assignment to come back to us sooner. And then we wait on the others as enrollment progresses to bring them back. We have a goal that by the time of the end of March, we should be able to have notified the majority of them to return back to our school district. So as we progress, the board will be presented with board items to return the temps back. When they return, they will be returning as probe 2s, not as probe 1s, which means they just have to complete another full school year for the 21-22 school year, then they become permanent. So they don't lose this temp year, they just are labeled differently. So they still need to complete 2 years before they become permanent. They're given credit for this temp year as one of the years. So we do explain all this to our employees, and again, our intention is to try to get them all back. The district has made a great deal of investment in our employees in relation to the induction program and training. So we really do appreciate the work that they've given us, and we want to keep the relationship with them. But again, in the circumstances, we don't know what our enrollment is and our needs are. So as we get closer to the school year starting, we will be asking these staff members to return. If there's any other questions, I'll be happy to entertain.
Questions? Yes.
I just want to say that when I was a temporary teacher, this was devastating. I mean, they gave it to me when I was right in the middle of my open house. So I just want to say I appreciate, I know.
Wow.
I just want to say I appreciate you having the training and telling the teachers what to look forward to and that you hope to bring them back. That's a very, I just want to say I appreciate that effort. Thank you.
Open house.
I know.
Wow.
Very painful.
Also, Julio, I appreciate by the end of March, you'll be able to tell most. Because as Mary Jo was saying, it's very stressful.
Mr. Heron, I was just to double check, you said that they will get, explain that again about they'll get credit for time. Can you just re-clarify that?
Absolutely. So the state of California requires 2 years or 75% of a year, which we consider a full year of service in order to qualify for the 2 years of probationary status in order for them to become a permanent employee. So although they're labeled as temps this school year, once they return first day of service on their second year, that temp year is, we consider it as a probe 1. So that status as a term, so they only need 1 more year of probationary status, which would be the next school year, and then they become permanent employees. In other words, it doesn't go temp, probe 1, probe 2. The temp year is considered their probe 1 year.
Okay, thank you.
So it kind of shocks because they're, I'm only a temp. So does that mean I need to give 2 more years? And the answer is no, that they are granted the temp year as a probe 1 year.
Well, that's probably good news for them when you explain that to them, so that's great. Thank you.
I have another question. So on some of them, they were like 0.13 or 0.23. So they already have 100% position, right? Are these extras?
Great question, thank you. So we have staff that are funded on a temporary basis for an additional period. So some teachers work their prep period, or they're being funded at what we used to call them categorical funds, but now it's LCAP and other funds that are not permanent. So they are released every year because we have no idea if that funding will remain. And on those employees, if they have that position for 2 years, they get permanency for that. So it's always important to release them, and then we have a conversation with the principals if we retain them or not. But we have to release anyone that's in a categorically funded position, meaning monies that are not from the general fund. And those sections of 0.2s, those fractions, those are additional periods. Mostly at the high school and others are singleton classes. Most teachers take on those assignments.
Is there a motion to approve? I'll move to approve item 12.7.
I'll second.
Okay, this is a resolution. We have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2020-2021.18, release of temporary employees. Mary Jo?
Aye.
Makashi?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Maher? Larson? Aye. Thank you. 12.8, this is Resolution 2020-2021.19 for non-reelection and release of probationary certificated employees.
So, thank you. This is a release of probationary employee, meaning that they were able to meet their year 1 and their year 2 via the recommendation of the principal. This is a release of an employee, and we have to separate them from a temp because they are a probe release, again, based on the recommendation of the principal. Education Code Section 44929.21 requires the governing board on or before March 15th of the second complete consecutive probationary year shall notify a probationary employee in a position requiring certificated qualifications of the decision to re-elect or not re-elect the employee to such a position for the succeeding school year. Staff is recommending that the certificated employee identified in resolution number 2020-2021.19, Exhibit A, be non-reelected for the 2021-2022 school year. If there's any questions.
Questions? No?
I'll move approval of 2020-2021.19.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve Resolution 2020-2021.19 on non-reelection and release of probationary certificated employees.
Aye.
Trustee Carrion? Makashi?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Maher? And Larson, aye. All right, thank you. 12.9, report, discussion, action, possible action on the agreement with Bobo Construction Incorporated.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to John to go through this award.
Okay, hello again. I'll be brief. This is a pretty fast one. And this is another continuing project of the HVAC roofing projects. Similarly to what you saw just earlier tonight, that was for the design services of Harvest Park Gymnasium. This one is farther along. We actually have the bid. We actually got multiple bids. We got 12, which is a lot. And so that was really good. And the successful low bidder is Bobo Construction at $742,000. And the good news is that it's actually under budget by over $350,000. So we're one of the success stories during hard times with COVID. But we're going to take it and and hope for the best on all these. The good thing is also Bobo Construction is working on 2 other packages with the district. So they have a total of 6 sites that they'll be doing roofing and HVAC work this summer. So they gave a very competitive price, and we believe that was part of the reason that they could cut their price a little bit, is because they're already going to be in the district. So administration recommends that the board approve the contract for package 5 of the HVAC roofing project with Bobo Construction.
Do we have questions?
John, they're going to also paint the school?
This is the one school they will be painting in entirety, yes.
Any other questions? Seek a motion to approve the contract.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the contract with Bobo Construction. Are there any other questions or discussion? Trustee Carrion?
Aye.
Kashi?
Aye.
Miller?
Aye.
Maher? Larson? 5-0. Aye. Thank you, John. On to 12.10. This is discussion and possible action on the Pleasanton Virtual Academy proposal. Mr. Dialazo.
Thank you, President Larson. This is item 12.10. It is a report, discussion, and possible action item on the Pleasanton Virtual Academy proposal. It is our goal to continuously improve our educational options that are available to our students. In this proposal, we're presenting information that takes a closer look at our independent study program. Specifically, we're proposing an enhancement and redesign of long-term independent study to include a virtual learning component. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Heather Pereira, our Director of Educational Options, who will walk us through the presentation. Ms. Pereira?
Good evening, Superintendent Haglin, President Larson, Board of Trustees, Cabinet, and staff and students that are watching. I'm going to share my screen with you so you can see the presentation as we talk. Hopefully that is working. All right, so as Mr. Dialazzo stated, we are continuing to enhance the options that are available for students here in the Pleasanton Unified School District. Just going to start with a little overview of the educational options that are currently available in PUSD. We have comprehensive, these are our traditional schools. These schools require compulsory daily in-person attendance. We have an alternative high school. The focus here is on credit recovery and additional support for more high needs students. We have the middle college at Las Positas, the middle college high school, also opt-in, housed at Las Positas College, and students enroll in high school and college courses simultaneously. And then we've had for a number of years a long-term independent study program, but it was very small. Over the past few years, I was involved in a project to possibly expand that to help some of our students that were participating in home and hospital instruction. And then this year, during our pandemic, we had a bigger need to serve students in independent study. So with this expansion, what we're proposing is that the independent study program becomes the virtual academy program, and I'll explain those details as we go on here. Two other programs that are housed within PUSD for students who can't attend on a daily basis are short-term independent study and then home and hospital instruction. This proposal doesn't affect short-term independent study at all. That will still function as it currently has, and that's really that's housed at the school sites. So the school sites handle those contracts, and that's for students that are unable to attend school for a maximum of about 10 days. Home and hospital instruction is different. This serves students who incur a temporary disability, which makes attending school regularly impossible or inadvisable. Students do remain enrolled in their seat-based, attendance-based classes. And then we hire a home teacher that works really as a liaison between the classroom teacher and the student. The Ed Code doesn't define temporary. PUSD, we try to define temporary as 6 weeks. However, we do have pretty regularly students that remain in home and hospital for longer than the recommended 6 weeks because we don't really have a viable alternative for them. And that's something we hope to solve with this program as well. So why Virtual Academy? Why now? The data feedback has long indicated that a differentiated model is needed for a variety of reasons. Some students, I know, we're really focused right now on helping our kids that are not doing well, but some students are reporting that they're thriving in the remote distance learning environment and that having a different way to do school is actually appealing to them. During this time, home teaching requests specifically for anxiety and depression have reduced dramatically over last year when we were not in a pandemic. The traditional pathway just doesn't work well for all students. This provides us an opportunity to partner more deliberately with community organizations and higher education institutions to benefit student learning. And then for the 21-22 school year, in-person attendance may not be desirable for all students. So this provides just another option for families and students. I'm not going to read through this slide entirely. I'll grab one of these, but this is just some feedback from
the long-term independent study program this year. So this year we started very, very small, 1 teacher. We're now at 4 teachers. We currently have a little over 100 students in long-term independent study. We've had some students opt to go back to the hybrid program, and then we did have a little waiting list, so we're bringing in additional students now. So just the one that I'll read for you is from the high school counselor. Many of my students have benefited from being able to take a few courses at the comprehensive high school and a few through IS, which is independent study. Although they desire to do well in school and be four-year college eligible, the challenges they face make it feel nearly impossible to accomplish that within the confines of the normal school structure. When we're able to be flexible, these students thrive. It would be wonderful to see our offerings and options expand through independent study. And this is a very common ask of our high school counselors. And then there's some additional comments from folks whose students are participating in the program this year. So what is it? How is it different? How is it similar? So really the Virtual Academy allows us to students to remain enrolled in the Pleasanton Unified School District and have a personalized learning experience. And I'll talk about how we do that in a bit. The Virtual Academy doesn't require daily in-person attendance, but in-person opportunities that enhance learning will be provided throughout the school year. Obviously, with the pandemic, we've not been doing that. Prior to this year, independent study students were able to meet in person. Is Virtual Academy the same as the other schools in Pleasanton? Yes and no. Educational rigor and learning outcomes are comparable. However, the path that the student takes to access the learning is different. In the Virtual Academy, students are able to interact with the curriculum in a different way. And inherent in the program is flexibility and choice. How would this operate in our first year? So in our first year, we're going to operate as an independent K through 8 school and as a program within the 3 existing high schools in the 21-22 school year. The independent study apportionment model will be used, and then students will opt into the Virtual Academy. Program building will continue year after year, and then additional opportunities and collaborations will be added as they're able to be established. K through 5 elementary. Just some quick overview. We'll utilize the digital platforms that we currently have available as part of our current elementary adoptions. And as of now, after this year being remote, we have lots of digital tools available to us. Students will meet with teachers 1 hour per week and complete between 180 and 240 minutes of learning activities per school day. And I should reiterate, that's a minimum of 1 hour per week because our teachers are actually doing more than that now. They're doing group activities with kids and stuff. Enrichment opportunities will be available for students. And then in-person hands-on learning and social opportunities will enhance the independent learning experiences. And then particularly for our littles, parent and guardian coaching will be made available. Many of our families of the K-5 crowd, they come to us and said, we were going to do homeschooling, but if we can do this instead, we would prefer that because they get the help of a certificated teacher. So we're happy to help with that. Middle School Virtual Academy, similar to the structure of elementary, but we'll start using our learning management system. So Edgenuity is the platform that we currently use. Edgenuity is customizable. It's a learning management system and has content. So our teachers actually are able to use those to customize the experience for the student. Students will meet with the teacher minimum of 1 hour per week, and we'll have access to content area specialists. Unique electives are available for the students. And then just like the elementary, the in-person learning and social opportunities. 9 through 12. Again, we're going to utilize the learning management system of Edgenuity, always keeping an eye on our PUSD course outlines and standards as our course maps, essentially. Students will have the opportunity to meet with a subject area teacher for at least 1 hour per week and complete a minimum of 240 minutes of schoolwork per day. Many unique electives are available. Majority of courses are UC A to G. We're saying for now that we're not currently recommending this for NCAA athletes. We're actually in the process of getting these courses approved by the NCAA. I do think by the time summer rolls around, we'll have those approvals, but I just want to be very clear right now, we're in that process. In-person and hands-on learning opportunities will be made available. Students may participate in social activities through Virtual Academy or the comprehensive schools. And then additionally, we'll make parent and guardian coaching available here. So what makes it unique? So we have a long tradition here in Pleasanton of excellence, excellent staff, excellent teachers, excellent students, great programs. So we're using current staff members to staff the Virtual Academy, and we'll try to do so for the foreseeable future. They're going to bring the curricular expectations, the rigor, and the creativity from our, brick and mortar classrooms to the Virtual Academy. We're also, as part of onboarding for independent study, we have an opportunity to meet with each family and each student and have a conversation, and we're going to integrate into that conversation the individual learning plan. So this is something that we'll be able to revisit with our students each semester and keep updated, so that we can really just have conversations about what they're trying to do, what is their goal in whatever grade they happen to be in at that time. And because of our flexible structure, we will have some creative ways to help them, kind of get where they want to be. The Virtual Academy does allow students to have more time to explore passions and interests outside of school. One of our students described it best. It's just efficient. And that is providing him with time to do other things that he enjoys. Part of the goal, particularly for the 9 through 12 group, is to really enhance our partnerships, our internships and mentorships. We'd really like to embrace that learning by doing. Have kids out into the real world. Our teachers are very excited about bringing new opportunities to students. And by having, again, the time to do that, we should be able to create these partnerships readily. We live in an awesome area for creating lots of opportunities for students to take advantage of the world-renowned universities, research institutions that are right at our doorstep. And because they won't have to be in a seat at a certain time every day, it gives them the time to do these things instead, to enhance their learning. So this is a super common question from families, can Virtual Academy students participate in specialized courses? So absolutely, yes. We want our students to, we know that we have a plethora of programs at our comprehensive schools that we're just not going to be large enough to replicate, nor would it really be appropriate with our scope. So yes, a full-time student, a student needs to be full-time somewhere. So they're going to have to decide, do they want to be full-time Virtual Academy or full-time at the comprehensive site? And then we will permit students to take classes at the school they're not full-time in, that are not offered at the school that they are full-time in. So for example, if a student is full-time Virtual Academy and they would like to participate in band, of course they may do that. If a student is full-time at Foothill High School and they want to participate in our Earth and Space Science course, which isn't currently offered at the comprehensive high school, then yes, of course, they could do that with us. They have to take the class at their full-time school, though, if it's offered. This will just create clarity for everyone. So Virtual Academy beyond 21-22. So we're going to continue to grow and evolve. It's been really exciting and really hard to go from 1 teacher to 4 this year. But now we have a crew, and it's just been great to really put some meat on the skeleton that was independent study. We have exceptionally talented teachers working on this. So a couple of the educational strategies that we really want to prioritize in the first year are project-based learning. Our teachers are already doing that with kids. They put packets together and with all of the hands-on tools that the kids need to build and grow things at their homes, and they mail them to them. We want to really be thoughtful about differentiation. One of the things that we really like about the learning management system is that it provides a really manageable way for a teacher to differentiate for a student. And that's one of the components of the platform that are really important to us. We really want to look at experiential learning. That's getting the kids out there into the world. And then competency-based learning. We often get questions from families who, they're like, my student already knows how to do this, and yet we have to sit in this class. Like, how do we move past that? So we really want to explore and be able to do that properly with students. An important component of the evolution and the growth will be connection with our stakeholders, the students, the staff, and the families. So timeline, so February, that's now. We are here to ask you to approve the preliminary plan for establishing the school and program, including the the tentative budget and the plan to move forward with the application for the CDS code. And then in mid-February to April, we'll communicate to PUSD school community and beyond. We will start registration and enrollment. And then in May, we will continue with our master schedule building. We'll know more about our staffing needs at that time. And then in August, we'll bring in our first group of virtual students, and then we'll begin the WASP accreditation process for grades 9 through 12. These are just some FAQs. I won't read through all of them for you, but I think a really important one is, can any student apply? What if they have an IEP or 504 plan? Absolutely, any student can apply. The criteria for independent study is that a student must have demonstrated the capacity to study independently. That is a pretty flexible criteria. We go through with the student in the intake meeting their prior academic history. We ask questions, and we typically err on the side of like, we want to let the student try independent study if that's something they want to do, or in the new version, the virtual academy. If a student has an IEP or 504, they absolutely are welcome to apply. We need to know that they have an IEP or 504, particularly because we have to hold an IEP change of placement meeting, and we want to be sure to do that. The rest of the questions I'll let the public read, and I know you all had a copy of this in advance. Budgetary estimation is about $1.1 million, is kind of a high estimate. Some of the staffing costs will be shifted, but we don't really yet know what that'll look like. We also could potentially increase enrollment because we can bring students back who have gone to other independent study programs or to homeschooling. So the 1.1 really represents running a school based on 250 students if there was no shifting in enrollment from our other districts or from our other schools in the district at all, and if there was no increased enrollment. So it's kind of a high estimate, and this is the first of many updates about this program to you. So we will keep you posted as we see what the patterns and the trends are for the Pleasanton Virtual Academy. Just board policy and ed code that we are using to guide our decisions as we built this program. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions that you have.
Who'd like to start? Mr. Miller.
I can. Okay, so I think this is a great idea, but I have some questions. So, and I asked this sort of in my weekend questions, so this is essentially equivalent to the Flex Academy that we were talking about last summer, which ended up, we had to put on the back burner because of everybody going remote and that type of thing. But I guess two questions there. In that, I seem to recall, I didn't go back and review all that, but it seemed to recall there was a whole catalog of classes that we were planning to offer in the Flex Academy, and dozens of classes. Is that what we're planning to do here? And then what if it's not 250 students that apply? What if it's 2,500 students that apply? How do we, what's the thought there?
Yeah. So yes, the courses we are planning to offer are the same courses. There's a few slight differences. We've gone through and really tried to provide some additional electives for particularly the middle school group. That's a consistent ask from middle school. But yes, we're trying to, in the beginning years, provide students with enough flexibility, but make it manageable for what we think might be a smallish enrollment. To your other question of what if it's 2,000, we can't actually take 2,000 students. We have to remain at 10% or less of our district enrollment because it will be structured through independent study apportionment. So we do have an application that students fill out, and right now our plan is to accept students on a rolling basis, so first come, first serve. It is a little tricky because we've never offered this in a very robust, clearly defined and publicly really advertised way before, so it's hard to tell how many students we might have, and we still have the pandemic effect. And then add to that, it's brand new. Sometimes people are willing to try something new. Sometimes people are not. I think a benefit is, of course, that it's brand new, but it's Pleasanton unified teachers and structure and, quality. So with that, I think, we'll certainly have students that are interested in this.
So my next question is then, and this is my week or bi-weekly crystal ball question. So if we're still in a situation where we need to offer remote instruction to more than the 7%, I think I heard 7%, it was a little faint. What was it? 10%. Oh, 10%, thanks. More than that, I would assume that we're either going to continue what we learned this end of this year or come up with some new approach to handling that situation. This isn't the only situation for remote learners, I guess is my question, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I can't see everybody, so I don't know if if Dr. Woodward would want to
She's
jump in
shaking
on
her
this.
head
But
no.
yeah, we're learning a lot. We haven't started concurrent teaching yet, so that's starting, and we'll continue learning. And I don't know that any of us are, and again, Dr. Woodward, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think any of us are willing to rule out additional possibilities for remote learning in the fall.
Yeah, that is correct. In fact, we have to consider several different possibilities because we really don't know where we're going to be. I think I've stated before that we have learned so much and come so far that we really have to be open-minded about what we might be able to do to support all of our students. And as we go through the rest of this year, we'll become more familiar with additional instructional delivery strategies. Concurrent instruction is one of those strategies, and there may be others that we learn. And all of these can be taken into consideration as options for us for next year.
Okay, good, thanks.
I mean, I don't want to, I just, no, like you said, nobody has a crystal ball here. I just find it hard to imagine that the governor is going to extend his executive order and allow parents to choose to not have their students go in person next fall. That's my personal belief. Because of the disaster of remote learning across the state. But, we don't know what he's going to do and what the legislature is going to do. So I appreciate the thoughtfulness behind it. And I didn't mean to cut you off, Mark. I didn't know if you were done.
No, that's interesting. I thank you. That's good. Okay, I guess my last question for now is around the teaching. So, and I asked this as well, but so you'd have a teacher that would be perhaps a virtual academy teacher meeting 1 hour a week or more with students, but then they would also might be teaching physics at Foothill as well, or things like, I mean, they're not just a virtual academy teacher, that's just one of the subjects that they're teaching, or how does that work exactly?
Yeah, it could work that way. We certainly, particularly at the high school level, we're certainly prepared for that scenario where, we might only have one section of physics in the virtual academy. And so one of our teachers from Amador or Foothill, who's properly credentialed in physics, could serve as the teacher. And that's readily done now with technology. One of the things that our families who are currently with us really like is the flexibility. So we have to find the right teachers who are willing to be flexible in that, students might need to meet with them after hours, and not on a super, tight schedule every day from 8 to 2. So it really would take the right teacher who's willing to be flexible in their approach, but absolutely would love to have that scenario personally, because I think it grows our capacity for our teachers and for our students.
Trustee Miller, can I add to that too? So thinking about the budget that Ms. Pereira reviewed, that $1 million, if it's a teacher who's already employed, full-time employment, we would just shift the section over to the virtual academy. So that's why we were thinking about maybe it's not that true cost of $1 million, it'll be a shifted cost from already employed teachers.
Yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, one really quick final question. This is the rear view mirror question. We actually polled parents back last summer to see which approach that they were going to choose. Do we remember how many chose Flex Academy? Do you remember that?
Yes. And it changed constantly. At one time it was as high as 2,000. But I don't know that those numbers are anything we can really rely on. It was so much fear and unknown at the time. It was really challenging. And those numbers would fluctuate by hundreds in a day sometimes, depending on what the beginning of school was going to look like, which inherently made all of it really challenging. And maybe those numbers are correct. Maybe there's a few thousand students that are interested in this modality of school, but I seem to feel it's going to be a little bit less than that.
Yeah, Mark, what I would say to that is that we're functioning under the assumption that we're bringing kids back to campus in the fall. And yet at the same time, there's some students in families who have realized that this type of a learning environment actually works better for them. That's not a lot of students. And from prior experience, I'll tell you that there's probably a lot of people that want to take a class or two, but the number of people that want to do this full-time that's probably an optimistic number of 250 full-time students. And so I don't want folks to think that this is the remote option for Pleasanton students. This is for families that want to pursue this full-time for good, not temporarily until something else changes in the COVID numbers.
And I had a question about, we've talked about this before, and you've had some experience with this. Why wouldn't we want to run this as a dependent charter so that we could does it make it easier to attract students from other districts to augment our enrollment if we're a dependent charter, or does it matter whether we are?
It does not matter. There are some benefits to being a charter school, and really there's no such thing as a dependent or independent charter school.
Well, we would be the...
Those are terms of art. It just means that the charter school it sits within the school district's portfolio of schools, and those types of charter schools tend to be called dependent charter schools because they can but don't always share a common, all the structures of the school district are afforded to that to that charter school, including the direction of the board. The charter school, which we called a dependent charter school that we started in Santa Ana, we did it in partnership with UCI, and we had staff from Stanford that participated in the development of the PBL program that was the curricular backbone of that school. Because there was so much investment at the university level, we decided to have a separate board which had representatives from the other schools as members of the board. And so it had its own governing team. The district's governance team did not approve their LCAP, their budget, but the other board did that. So there's some complications with that type of a model that we certainly can talk through and look at. At the model down in Santa Ana, we followed the CBA. We didn't do a whole lot that a charter school would want to take advantage of outside of some flexibility with curriculum, and we pursued some grant funding opportunities that are available only to charter schools. And so there are some reasons why you might want to do it, but there's also reasons why it just provides another layer of budgeting paperwork and all that fun stuff. So it's something we can consider, and it's not something that we would have to do at the get-go.
But I guess the real crux of my question is could we still attract students to the virtual academy from other districts?
Yeah. So the flexibility afforded to the school as an independent study program allows you to recruit students from anywhere in your county and any contiguous county.
Okay.
And so there certainly is an opportunity there. Not that we want to create this program so that we can pilch other, districts' student enrollment, but there are a lot of students out there whose parents have pursued homeschooling and other things because they want more control over their student during the day. We were able to develop a good relationship with the homeschooling community in the area in Orange County, and separately at a different school in Riverside, to where those families came back as a part of that virtual school program because they still had control of their student during the day. And so when Heather was talking about potentially increasing student enrollment, those are opportunities where you both are able to benefit from the increased enrollment, but the families are able to benefit from the curricular expertise that your teachers bring to the table.
Okay. And then my other question, and Heather, you alluded to this a little bit. So what are the qualifications that we would be requiring a teacher to have in order to teach in this academy?
Yeah, so currently an independent study teacher, K through 12, can actually teach, and because it's independent study, they're not truly teaching, can mentor students with any credential. We are shifting to follow the guidance of the UCs with our high school classes and providing teachers with content area credentials. So that's why we were talking about like the possibility of having sort of a teacher that might just have one section of the virtual academy because the demand may not be that high, but they would be properly credentialed in their subject area. K through 5 would be multiple subject, and then middle school will try to stick to sort of the block model that we currently use in our middle schools, where you'll have ELA and history together, sometimes math and science together for the credentialing. We want to be clear that we want highly qualified individuals to be able to assist the students with the content.
Thank you. Yes.
So I really like this idea because not all students learn the same way. I like that. I just have a quick question about what about AP classes or Project Lead the Way?
Yeah, so our elementary team is particularly interested in Project Lead the Way Launch. Launch does, it is used here in Pleasanton Unified already. I don't think it was ever officially adopted as an NGSS aligned K through 5 curriculum. It's adopted as a supplemental curriculum. but it does align with the next generation science standards. We currently in independent study use TWIG and would continue to do so. But again, sort of that efficiency I spoke to earlier would provide more time for teachers to dive into the Project Lead the Way launch curriculum. And they're kind of trying to figure out like what that would look like. We have a couple of teachers who currently teach in our classrooms who've reached out and, you know, kind of asked, would that be a direction we'd go in? And I'd love to be involved with it. Project-based learning is something that we really would like to include a lot more of. It's a frequent ask of our families that are currently in independent study, and we see plenty of opportunities to make sure that we have that available for our students. AP classes we can also offer. There's a process. If it's a teacher who's never taught an AP class before, they just get they go through the process of the College Board certification to be certified as an AP teacher, and that just requires a single subject credential. And so those are able to be offered as well. We do have a space here on the district office campus that we'll be utilizing as our assessment center for AP and for our UC A-to-G approved courses. It is an agreement that we have with the College Board and with the UCs that these exams will be proctored. So that they're not just taking the exams at home. The students would have to come here and take the exams under a proctored condition. So we plan to comply with all of that as soon as we're not in COVID situation anymore.
I could add to the AP question, because of the flexibility that's available for students who are enrolled in a program like this, it opens up all kinds of opportunities for students to take college classes at LASPO. So would I take an AP class when I can take an actual college class? So there's a whole lot of opportunities that we'll be able to provide for students that may not look exactly like the opportunities that they are afforded at the comprehensive school.
Okay, well, first I wanted to thank Heather for a great presentation, very comprehensive, very thorough, very exciting to hear. Thank you for the time earlier today to, give some additional in-depth information. I just would like to say, celebratory how much growth has happened this year with teachers and staff learning how to use, in particular, the learning management system with Edgenuity. Really more just for, public sake. Heather, can you talk a little bit more about the assessment options with Edgenuity? I know there are some assessments built in with the classes, but I know there's some flexibility with teachers as well. Could you share a little bit about the assessment options with teachers when they're using the Edgenuity platform?
Sure. Yeah. So Edgenuity it's two-pronged. It is the learning management system, and it comes with content, and that content is already A-to-G approved. So it parallels the content that we have in our A-to-G approved courses here in Pleasanton Unified. Most of our classes adhere to state standards or national standards when you're talking about like the NGSS. So they're all fairly aligned. Teachers have all of the flexibility with this learning management system to customize it to any extent that they would like. They can remove all of the content and build their own content. They can leave content that they think is appropriate and helpful for the children, and they do this a lot because some of the modules that are built into the Edgenuity allow students to do things like watch instruction multiple times, like multiple varieties of practice problems and things like that. It's fairly interactive. And they can utilize the assessments, and they can add their own assessments. Particularly when we're back in person, they could give an end of term assessment that is entirely their own, because that's in person. It doesn't even have to be on the computer at all. Our teachers now are utilizing Edgenuity in a variety of ways around the district, but in the virtual academy or independent study right now, teachers are supplementing with novels that we use in person in the classroom. We're mailing those home to kids, and they're doing the same assignments that they would do if they were sitting in a classroom at one of our middle schools or high schools. So there's lots of opportunities to supplement and customize. I look forward to the opportunity to sort of have all of these teachers who are wanting to explore more flexible ways of teaching and more flexible ways of learning in one place, so that we can collectively train around how to utilize these tools in the best way. Edgenuity, to me, or whatever learning management system we use, but particularly right now we use Edgenuity, it's just an instructional tool. The instruction comes alive with the teacher, and what the class looks like is the teacher building that. Although independent study, sort of the law of independent study is that students will study independently. That's not how we've been running independent study. It's sort of like independent study plus. Our teachers really try to support the students. Particularly having in the high school piece, having the content area specialists who are teaching possibly a live class at the same time, I think will enhance that for us even further.
Okay, great. That actually brings up my next question then. Most of the Edgenuity is asynchronous, but you just mentioned or alluded to having teachers maybe do some Zooms or something of that sort. You said 1 hour of instruction that teachers will work with students. Did you say that would be one-on-one or in small group? And I have a reason for asking that.
Yeah. So we're actually kind of thinking through the different scenarios. There's a bit of flexibility there. Right now, our teachers, like at elementary, depending on the grade level, sometimes they group them because they actually found that trying to meet one-on-one with a first grader is a little awkward, and they're happier when they have another first grader in there with them. So they're grouping kids for high school. Technically, the students have to have access to the content area specialist for a certain amount of time per week. We really like at the high school and middle school level, the one-on-one meetings with those students. So although that's not technically required for every content area, we still want to keep that in place. And that's a local decision for us to make. And we currently have it set as 1 hour a week for each student in independent study. But we want to make sure that we can integrate that individualized meeting for the older kids. So we don't know exactly how it will look because we have to figure out flexible ways for our students to access those content area teachers. As you can imagine, the older students tend to do most of their work later in the day. They're not up at 8 o'clock asking us questions. They are asking us questions at 7, 8, 9, 10, sometimes 11 at night. So trying to just kind of figure out a flexible way, but absolutely, we're really, really trying to build in a once a week mentoring meeting, learning coach, call it what you will, because that's been super successful for our older kids in keeping them on track. And that all kind of ties back to us having that individualized learning plan for the kids.
Okay, so the reason why I was asking that was on the staffing budgetary allotment. It's just something to monitor and watch, especially for secondary. In my experience with online learning and instruction myself professionally, you might find that caseload that secondary teachers can manage more students than 25 if they're just working with independent study students. But I know you said that that still has to be rolled out. If you're going to have, I do believe you said you are projecting a couple teachers to be full-time working with independent study students. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, I think we'll have at least a few full-time.